Lord of Mysteries, Lord of Order by Da Bai Bu Shi Xiong. Chapter 426-450. Ince Zangwil, wearing three faces, toyed with the pure white feather pen in his hand, unaffected by the aura of the death console. He raised his head, looked at the deep swirling vortex, and with a slight curl of his lips and half-closed eyes, sighed, "The death's legacy. With just you." Hater was silent for a moment, then spoke indifferently, "In the 1,000 years since the death's fall, we have not been without gains. Now, we only lack a catalyst. Regarding the influence on artificial deaths, even the Pale Empress cannot compare to us in this regard. You do not need to pay too great a price." A strange smile appeared on Ince Zangwil's face. "Let me guess, the catalyst you speak of wouldn't happen to be the former death consul, Azek Eggers, would it? Are you trying to get me to help you find him, or rather, help you capture him?" The undisguised mockery in his words did not cause Hater's emotions to fluctuate. In the boundless black mist, the almost illusory black tendrils began to twitch, and a chilling wind flew out from the deep vortex, merging into Ince Zangwil's expanding inner netherworld. At the center of the inner netherworld, the rotten marks on the face of the Red Angel Wraith, who had a banner mark between his brows and wore blood-stained black armor, gradually disappeared, revealing a look of satisfaction. A moment later, Ince Zangwil opened his eyes and nodded with satisfaction. "I have felt your sincerity. I can help you with this matter." Changing the subject, Ince Zangwil, toying with the pure white feather pen in his hand, added, "However, 008 is not omnipotent. Manipulating fate without any reason will certainly be detected." The profound vortex, its aura somewhat weaker than before, was silent for a moment, then suddenly began to expand. Emerald green soul flames burned, reflecting a blurry ocean. A huge sailing ship dominated the entire scene. Its hull was predominantly dark black, tinged with eerie green, and on the pale mainsail, a blooming dark tulip was depicted. This was Admiral Hel Ludwig's flagship, the Black Tulip. White skeletons clad in leather armor busily manipulated the sails, while pale zombies with long swords patrolled back and forth, their eyes, burning with eerie green flames, surveying their surroundings. Shadows, wraiths, and various strange spirit world creatures occasionally flew and circled, or drilled into the ship's hull, causing indistinct transparent faces to protrude from the sides. The next second, all the undead creatures prostrated themselves on the deck, led by Admiral Hel Ludwig, who was covered by a silver-white mask. Ince Zangwil surveyed the passage formed by the special combination of the angel rank and the netherworld, his gaze lingering on the square, dark ring on Ludwig's right hand. He whispered with interest, "A creation related to death. With this item, some things won't arouse suspicion. Remember your promise." Without waiting for Hater's reply, he walked directly towards the black tulip in the deep vortex. Ince Zangwil, having advanced to a Nightwatcher, could not be considered a standard spirit world creature, but the Red Angel Wraith's special nature was enough to sustain this passage. Absorbing the rich deathly aura that emanated, Ince Zangwil stood on the deck of the Black Tulip, glanced at the prostrate undead creatures, and beckoned to Ludwig, who was looking up slightly. Silently, the dark ring on his right hand seemed to be supported by countless spirits, flying up on its own and landing in Ince Zangwil's palm. After observing it for a few seconds, a mysterious smile played on his lips. He picked up the ring and casually put it on his index finger, then took out the pure white feather pen from his Y. In a certain sea area at the junction of the Sonia Sea and the Raging Sea, under the sunlight, the Golden Dream emitted a golden glow, like a moving treasure. But at this moment, everyone was on high alert, warily watching a massive whale-like creature on the nearby sea. Having just returned to the Golden Dream from a hidden route after completing his mission, Danitz could barely believe his eyes. He raised a hand to rub his eyes and looked at the enormous sea monster again, a familiar figure reflected in his pupils. Gehrman Sparrow. Danitz immediately cursed, which attracted the attention of the other crew members, but he was no longer in the mood to care about their strange looks. He lowered his head and quickly walked towards Alger, who was standing at the very front of the deck. "Damn it! This insidious fellow!" He cursed himself as he walked, connecting it to his previous inexplicable discovery in Biome. He was certain that this crazy adventurer had left a special mark on him. The thought that he might have attracted this crazy fellow made Danitz want to slap himself, but the most important thing now was to persuade the captain not to conflict with this terrifying lunatic. Klein, standing on the sea monster's back, naturally noticed the commotion on the Golden Dream. The light of Rusko's eye, embedded in the flesh of his left hand, dimmed, and the sea god's scepter hidden within it emitted obscure fluctuations, calming the sea monster beneath his feet. After leaving the Abyss Vortex, Klein stayed on Sonia Island for a few days, then came to the Galgas archipelago, known as the Pirates' Paradise. The faceless potion was digested very smoothly, which prompted him to start searching for traces of mermaids. Originally, he only wanted to find Danitz to take him to see Admiral Iceberg, but he unexpectedly ran into the main person. Just as Klein was thinking about how to express his goodwill and avoid an unnecessary misunderstanding, the Golden Dream, not far away, actively approached him, and the dangerous glow of its cannons gradually dimmed. Raising an eyebrow, Klein maintained his persona as a ruthless adventurer. His right hand, wandering hunger, quickly turned dark blue. Using the soul of a wind blessed he had pastured, he rode the strong winds and landed on the deck of the Golden Dream. This is Admiral Iceberg, with a bounty of 26,000 pounds. Following his spiritual intuition, Klein's gaze directly locked onto the tall woman standing at the very front, and Danitz, who was somewhat evasive behind her. His expression unchanged, but with a growing understanding in his heart, Klein said in a low, indifferent voice, "I heard before that the Golden Dream obtained a key that could open the Death's treasure, and your sailor told me that it was not true, so I specifically came to visit today." Because he already knew Mr. Azek's true identity, Klein, feeling greatly indebted after their last encounter in Backland, paid close attention to matters related to death. Clues related to the Death's treasure might be able to help Mr. Azek. Even with his head bowed, Danitz still felt the gazes from all around him scraping against his body. He cursed under his breath, then awkwardly raised his head and explained. "This is all a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding." Algerian waved her hand, stopping the other crew members who wanted to say something. A complex symbol outlined itself deep within her clear eyes as she scrutinized Klein opposite her. Her gaze lingered on the transparent human skin glove for a few seconds before Algerian slowly shook her head and spoke softly. "I did indeed obtain a peculiar key, but it was not the so-called key that could open Death's treasure. Instead, it came from an even older epoch. Moreover, half a year ago, I already sold this key to someone else. What is currently circulating in the 5 seas is indeed just a rumor." As she spoke, she took out a roll of light gold scroll from her sleeve. As it opened, Klein also felt a momentary daze, as if he saw a huge, strange, black iron-colored key flash before his eyes. A mystical item that can trace back and reproduce a certain memory. Klein quickly came back to his senses and gave a strange look at the scroll in Algeriana's hand, which had lost its charm. After thinking for a moment, he changed the subject and asked, "I've long heard that Vice Admiral Iceberg is knowledgeable and well-informed. I wonder if you know where mermaids can still be found in the 5 seas today." Whether it was out of fear of the hidden force behind Klein, or simply her usual habit of teaching pirates, Algeriana's expression was calm, and she even explained the information she knew in considerable detail. Finally, she reminded him, "Most of the rumors circulating on the sea are fabricated and false. I rarely explore the ruins of the God Wars. I cannot confirm if there are truly mermaids there. But I advise you to stay away from the God War ruins for a while, as that place has become a place of trouble." Klein subtly frowned. He did not get the answer he wanted. After a moment of silence, he suddenly asked, "There's a rumor on the sea that you had a conflict with Vice Admiral Disease. Is this true or false?" Algerian was startled by the sudden change in question. It took her a few seconds to slowly nod, then she looked at Klein with some confusion. A very bad feeling suddenly arose in Danitz's heart. Hiding behind Algeriana, he instinctively raised his head again, only to see the crazy adventurer's hidden insane smile. Danitz's face twitched involuntarily, and as expected, he heard the subsequent words. I want to try to hunt Vice Admiral Disease before she joins the Pirate Kingdom. I wonder if Vice Admiral Iceberg is interested in participating. Mist Sea, Lasha Island, Emerald Palace. With the help of True Sight, Aaron thoroughly examined roads, confirming that the pollution on this ferryman had been removed, and only the damage to his inner netherworld remained. Aaron then relaxed. Abyss of Ferrying, City of the Undead, Manuel. Aaron silently recited the location of the Fourth Epic Death Church's headquarters, which was also the current lair of the Artificial Death faction, as told by Rhodes. He quickly marked the specific location on the map of the southern continent in his mind, and corresponding information emerged in Aaron's thoughts. He did not intend to attack immediately. After all, the black mist filling the abyss of ferrying still required Rhodes to lead the way to avoid alerting the enemy. Therefore, he would at least have to wait for this ferryman to recover from his injuries. Aaron took out a stone of life from his life imprint and placed it on Rhodes's glabella. Dense vitality and death intent intertwined, repairing the fragmented inner netherworld. After doing all this, Aaron's spirituality stirred, sensing a gaze. A strange, inexplicable feeling arose in his heart. Following the sensation, he looked towards the deepest part of the Emerald Palace. Created by mystical reenactment, deep within the secluded paradise, a sealed artifact was sealed. It was entirely golden, resembling a miniature kettle, its surface covered with mysterious and complex symbols, and a wick protruded from its spout. 005, Wish-Granting Lamp. And the moment Aaron's gaze fell upon it, the wick of this Grade 0 sealed artifact ignited on its own. The light it emitted was exceptionally viscous, like water mixed with a lot of sugar. They surged upwards, converging into a twisted and blurry pale golden figure. Aaron's aura was chaotic for an instant, as if a force wanted to sever his connection with the Sephira. But Aaron, having already become a complete mythical creature, had long since completely controlled the nation of disorder. He instantly suppressed the anomaly and firmly bound a force that surged from the wish-granting lamp. The blurry, twisted golden figure swayed slightly, and its lamp-like, flickering gaze suddenly brightened, filled with pure malice, as it looked at Aaron outside the barrier. The expected temptation and transaction did not occur. After the lamp spirit's attempt failed, it directly returned to the wish-granting lamp, so quickly that Aaron, who had intended to say something, didn't even react. The power that affected the nation of disorder just now exceeded that of an ordinary angel. The power of the lamp spirit itself shouldn't be able to penetrate the seal too much. It's more about using its own Beander characteristics to amplify the power of wishes. Amidst his thoughts, Aaron turned his head to look at Bernadette, whose expression had slightly changed. After thinking for a moment, he said, "The wish-granting lamp will temporarily remain sealed by you. A divine oracle will come after a while, and then you can sacrifice it to my lord." Without asking for the reason, Bernadette simply nodded gently. Torrents of information surged from within her body, filling the source of peach blossoms that had been torn by the power of the wish-granting lamp. Just as she finished mending, Bernadette, seemingly sensing something, suddenly turned her head to look beyond Lasha Island. She gently raised her arm, and a rift connecting to the outside world appeared. Aemon, with an increasingly profound aura and deeply sculpted features, stepped out of the rift. In a single stride, he arrived before the two angels and also saw the somewhat agitated Rhodes not far away. Amon's expression shifted from blankness to pain, and he instinctively clutched his forehead, but he quickly regained his composure. After nodding to Aaron and Bernadette, Aemon, his eyes growing more ancient, walked towards the heavily injured and weakened Rhodes. Reaching into his own chest, Aemon extracted a drop of crimson blood. As runes flowed, it transformed into a lifelike feathered serpent. Aemon touched it to Rhodes's glabella, instantly stabilizing his inner netherworld, which had been on the verge of collapse. "Your Highness." Rhodes, whose injuries had finally stabilized, looked at the familiar face, inexplicably recalling the secrets the Pale Queen had spoken of in the underworld at that time, and his emotions suddenly became complex. Alsace Aegis glanced at Aaron and Bernadette behind Azek, opened his mouth, and whispered somewhat bitterly. Your Highness, you have also joined them. Azek moved his finger away from Alsace Agas's glabella, and shook his head calmly. No, this is just a cooperation, or rather, a transaction. They help me recover my lost memories, and in return, I will provide some assistance within my capabilities. Alsace Agas's somewhat dim eyes brightened. He let out a sigh of relief, then gave a bitter smile, and with difficulty stood up to perform a standard Fasak royal salute towards Azek. I will obey your will, esteemed administrator. Aaron withdrew his gaze from the re-isolated sealed artifact space in the deepest part of the Emerald Palace. After briefly sensing the ferryman's condition, he said indifferently, "You stay on Rasha Island first, recover from your injuries as soon as possible, and then we will go together to Manuel, the city of the undead, in the abyss of ferrying." Without waiting for Alsace Agas's reply, streams of light condensed into colorful feathers that enveloped him, carrying him away from the Emerald Palace. Aaron then looked at the calm-faced Azek, raising an eyebrow. Your memory seems to have recovered quite a bit. Mr. Azek curved his lips and smiled, saying, My travels in the southern continent during this period have allowed me to find many familiar things. I often feel that I am starting to become a little unfamiliar, especially after meeting this lady. Bernadette's eyes flickered. After glancing at Aaron, a pale mask with a metallic luster appeared in her hand. The holes for the eyes became even more profound. The mask, which originally had no facial features, now looked 7 or 8 parts similar to Azek. If not for Bernadette's suppression, this Grade 0 sealed artifact would probably have gone berserk directly. Looking at Pale Death, Azek's expression became somewhat dazed, but he quickly returned to normal, sighing and shaking his head. I seem to hear some kind of calling. Aaron withdrew his hand from Azek's shoulder, the dark golden light deep in his eyes gradually fading. After thinking for a moment, he said in a deep voice, Things must be done step by step. During this time, you can sense around the raging sea and see where you can feel a similar calling. Take this item. If you feel that calling is irresistible, just crush it directly. As he spoke, light surged in Aaron's hand, condensing into a dark golden token inscribed with complex patterns. He wanted to use Azek to determine the exact location of the secret mausoleum where the death pathway uniqueness was hidden in the raging sea. However, he also needed to guard against the activated artificial death breaking through its original restrictions and forcibly taking Azek into the mausoleum after sensing Azek's aura. After all, the ownership of the death pathway uniqueness could, to some extent, be considered the last straw that breaks the camel's back. Given Lowen's current weakened state, once the mausoleum was opened and the Evernight goddess took that uniqueness, the stimulated god of combat would no longer have any scruples. Fasak and the god of combat church would likely enter the fray immediately, and a world-sweeping war would instantly erupt. Whether it was a pretense to deceive the god of combat, or a genuine intention to digest and accommodate the uniqueness, the Evernight goddess would find it difficult to provide him with further assistance. This was also one of the reasons why he had specifically gone to the Church of the Storms to meet the Lord of Storms before. Therefore, the mausoleum could only be opened after he had made preparations for war, taking advantage of the chaos in the northern continent to encroach upon the southern continent. Azek did not know what Aaron was thinking. After taking the token and examining it for a moment, he put it into his body's underworld. Then, Azek nodded lightly, smiled apologetically at Bernadette, and left this space, which was isolated from the outside world, through the previous rift. Withdrawing his gaze from Azek, Aaron was now looking at Bernadette, who was suppressing Pale Death. 2 ancient tarot cards had appeared before her. Both fronts depicted Russell Gustav, and in the upper left corner, stars condensed into text, Sequence 0 Hermit, and Sequence 0 Wheel of Fortune. The next second, Bernadette's body suddenly became transparent, transforming into a chaotic stream of information that quickly dispersed. A illusory river of fate subtly emerged, connecting the 2 blasphemy cards. As a Sequence 2 sage, with the rank bonus of the 2 blasphemy cards and their shared characteristic of pointing to fate, she could already influence the river of fate. Symbols peeled off from the illusory river of fate, reforming into Bernadette. After resealing, pale death, which had fallen into a karmic cycle and whose will had faded, she put away the 2 blasphemy cards. Truly wealthy. Aaron scrutinized the 2 blasphemy cards, tutting inwardly. Including the 3 grade 0 sealed artifacts, the inheritance Russell left for his eldest daughter was astonishingly abundant. Excluding the divine contaminated Bonoa, and comparing it to the situation of his eldest son Charles, Aaron could confirm that Russell was a doting father to his daughters. Noticing Aaron's somewhat strange gaze, Bernadette frowned. Wisps of light peeled off from her body, forming a stream of information that, along with the 2 blasphemy cards, she handed to Aaron. Here is intelligence on Orovie Island's secret strongholds in the northern and southern continents and the 5 seas, as well as a general overview of the sealed artifacts and mystical items controlled by Orovie Island. These 2 blasphemy cards are gifts he left for me, so I can only let you observe them. According to the Oracle of the Lord of Order, all remaining items, including those 2 grade 0 sealed artifacts and Orovie Island, can be at your disposal. Allowing the complex mass of information to merge into his body, Aaron, with his angel-level spiritual body strength, instantly digested and understood all the information, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Excluding the army, Orovie Island's foundation was roughly on par with the East Turdak family before Aaron embarked on the Beander pathway a few years ago. With strongholds in important cities across the northern and southern continents and the 5 seas, this mature, world-spanning intelligence network perfectly compensated for the East Turdak family's shortcomings. Nodding with satisfaction, Aaron then looked at the 2 blasphemy cards in his hand. Due to Will Osepton, he already knew most of the information that the Wheel of Fortune card could interpret. Temporarily setting aside the Wheel of Fortune card, Aaron picked up the Hermit card and met the gaze of those indifferent eyes, which contained countless brilliant stars and had no eyelashes. There was no need for interpretation, a terrifyingly complex amount of knowledge instantly flooded Aaron's mind. If he had not already advanced to angel, just this alone would have put even a demigod who had crossed the divine gate at risk of losing control. Aaron shook his somewhat groggy head. After a few seconds, he finally sorted out the information in his mind, his eyebrows furrowing involuntarily. He suddenly turned his head sharply, directly meeting Bernadette's ocean blue eyes, and murmured with some uncertainty. The Hermit's advancement ritual. Bernadette seemed to have anticipated Aaron's reaction. She raised her hand, summoned the 2 blasphemy slates, carefully put them away, and then calmly responded. Using a torrent of information formed by oneself, and leveraging the opportunity of advancement, to momentarily replace the information of the spirit world, astral world, and the real world. Based on the information of that instant, deduce the future, and from the infinite possibilities of the future, choose the future one desires, thereby completely controlling the next 2 or 3 moments and integrating with the abstract concept of knowledge. Endure the information surge of the entire world, recondense from abstract knowledge, and return from the astral world. This kind of advancement ritual, without sufficient anchors, is almost impossible to succeed. Even if successful, extracting consciousness from the immeasurable torrent of information and recondensing the body would likely not be something that can be completed in a short time. Aaron nodded, his eyes flickering. He looked at Bernadette and asked, somewhat uncertainly, "Is the hidden sage truly just a uniqueness that has become active? Could it be?" Knowing Aaron's meaning, Bernadette did not immediately respond. Her blue eyes slightly unfocused, as if she had fallen into a memory, before she continued after a moment. You should know that since the 4th epoch, the only feasible way to accommodate a uniqueness is to temper it into an incomplete potion, and consume it with a simplified God ascension ritual. Combining this with his discoveries after he advanced to Knowledge Emperor, the hidden sage is more like suddenly awakening from slumber than suddenly becoming active. Activated, awakened, the meanings represented by these 2 words were completely different. Aaron inexplicably thought of the 4th epoch, that god of craftsmen who forcibly advanced before fully digesting his potion, and this roughly coincided with the hidden sage's appearance. Glancing at the thoughtful Aaron, Bernadette finally added, "Although the relevant knowledge has been completely erased from the spirit world, making it impossible to verify. I still have a conjecture. The hidden sage is very likely the product of an accident that occurred when the original founder of the Moses ascetic order attempted to accommodate the hermit uniqueness. This bold speculation made Aaron look at Bernadette a few more times, but he did not refute it. For the hermit pathway, which leans more towards the mystical side of knowledge itself, Bernadette's conjecture was not impossible. But if it were true, then the accident that occurred while accommodating the uniqueness might very well have originated from the contamination of the knowledge more. As his thoughts churned, Aaron exhaled lightly, first noting this matter in his mind, then actively changing the subject. I'll be returning to Backland later. Does your goddaughter still need the blood of a fate pathway angel? Goddaughter. Bernadette was momentarily stunned, her gaze softening. She did not correct Aaron's address. After a moment of silence, she slowly spoke. The Moses ascetic order already knows that I recently advanced to angel, so Katlia is not suitable to attempt advancing to demigod during this period, as it would invite suspicion. However, the blood of a fate pathway angel can be prepared in advance. I will pay the corresponding remuneration. Aaron glanced at Bernadette, tutting inwardly. He felt a strong sense of déjà vu, like watching an old mother toil for her own child. Nodding, Aaron strode out of Rasha Island. Before his figure disappeared, his last words slowly echoed through the Emerald Palace. Seal the wishing lamp well. Do not be tempted by it. Lowen Kingdom, Backland, Dr. Allen's house. After advancing to a complete mythical creature, Aaron could now autonomously restrain the peculiarities of the Nation of Disorder. As long as he didn't directly encounter the few angels of the Lowen royal family, he could freely enter and exit Backland, even without the secretive effect of the night mark. Aaron, emerging from the spirit world, walked through the living room as if no one else was there and entered the bedroom. Looking at the pregnant woman with her belly greatly swollen on the bed, an amber, crystal clear and seemingly made of night stars, appeared in his hand. The milky white dice of probability was firmly sealed within it. Observing so closely, even the special nature of restart could not obstruct Aaron's vision. Dr. Allen's wife had turned into an boundless deep black, and the oval light mass in the shape of a baby appeared exceptionally dazzling. It was too late to feign death. A childish voice suddenly rang out, sighing rather plaintively. An invisible force struck, and Aaron's lips curved into a smile. He did not resist. The warm and comfortable bedroom suddenly twisted, and Aaron was already in a barren plain. Not far away stood a black spire, around which a giant silver-white serpent coiled. Its head was already raised, its crimson eyes coldly watching Aaron. Wei Ang Sai Ting, wrapped in silver silk and sitting in a black baby carriage, appeared at the lowest part of the spire. He pulled the small blanket in the baby carriage and said rather plaintively, "Can't you be more careful, you fellow? If the dice of probability were to fully activate, it might directly abstract itself and merge into the river of fate. By then, let alone me, even Ouroboros, with the true Creator's help, probably wouldn't be able to find it again." Listening to the nagging complaints, the smile on Aaron's face stiffened slightly. He cleared his throat and raised the crystal amber, which sealed the dice of probability in his hand. Last time was indeed a special situation, I had no choice. I've already paid the price and asked Mother to help me seal it again. This time, firstly, I wanted to see how your restart is progressing, and secondly, to return the dice of probability along the way. Or if you have other arrangements, you can tell me directly. Finally, there are some things I'd like to ask for your help with. Before Aaron could finish, the chubby infant in the black baby carriage began pounding the bassinet, crying very sadly, and interrupting Aaron's words with sobs. The seal on the dice of probability is entirely formed by misfortune. You are the dear of that being, so you are naturally unaffected by misfortune at the god level. But if I were to give it to Richard, he might run into that stinky snake Ouroboros as soon as he steps out the door. At this, Wei Ang Sai Ting lowered the hand that was wiping away tears, sniffled, and pointed to himself, adding, "As for asking me for help, you've already advanced to angel. Are you going to make things difficult for an unborn infant like me? Aaron's face twitched slightly. Looking at the chubby infant with tear stains on his face and staring at him, it was hard to believe that this was an old monster who had lived for thousands of years. Aaron shrugged helplessly, putting away the dice of probability, sealed in the amber of misfortune, yet feeling a sense of relief. Thankfully, after Ms. Ariana sent the dice of probability, he didn't directly give it to Richard. Otherwise, this counselor, who had escaped the Rose School of Thought's encirclement, might have become the first demigod to die from bad luck. Looking at the baby with tear stains in his eyes, Aaron sighed, forcing a smile. It seems Mr. Speaker's reboot was very smooth. I will continue to keep and seal the dice of probability until you are born and return to your peak. Also, this time I only wanted a few drops of blood of the serpent of fate. I imagine you should have kept some before your reboot. As for the rest, you probably can't help much now. We can discuss it when you are truly born. Ang Sai Ting pouted, muttering reluctantly. It must be Ouroboros, that smelly snake, who stole too much of my luck while I was rebooting. Sherwood Borough, Siffield Street, number 44. I left something there, which was originally prepared for me to recover my strength quickly after my birth. So, you can only take 2 drops of blood at most, and do not destroy the fate cycle I left there. Aaron raised an eyebrow, noting down the place name, and the smile on his face became even more sincere. But before he could say anything more, the entire black wasteland suddenly shattered, leaving only a tender echo reverberating. In the future, bring the dice of probability to Backland less often. Its strong aggregation effect easily attracts Ouroboros. Standing in front of Dr. Allen's bedroom, Aaron chuckled and shook his head, no longer paying attention to Ang Sai Ting, who had started playing dead. His figure directly disappeared into the colorful, rich color blocks. Sherwood Borough, Siffield Street, number 44. Aaron emerged from the shadows of the alley, his appearance and build also changing. After withdrawing his gaze from the layered, magnificent palaces and towering Gothic clock towers in the distance, Aaron finally looked at the house opposite, which Ang Sai Ting had mentioned. From the outside, it was just an ordinary house. If Aaron hadn't still been holding the dice of probability, and if his true vision couldn't capture the abnormalities in fate, he might have even been fooled. As expected of the old fellow who had been chased by Ouroboros for thousands of years, even Palas would feel inferior to this kind of concealment method. Aaron muttered a few words to himself, and a paper crane appeared in his hand. Without the enhancement of true vision, the feeling of looking at flowers through a fog also disappeared at this moment. Following the fluctuations in fate caused by the paper crane, Aaron's figure instantly vanished from his original spot. The illusory sound of tides echoed in his ears. Aaron proactively restrained his aura to avoid disrupting the fate cycle arranged by Ang Sai Ting here. Aaron arrived at a corner of the living room, which was also the source of the illusory tide sound. A luminous door inscribed with the symbol of the Ouroboros appeared under the gaze of true vision. Before Aaron could push open the door, the paper crane floating in front of him seemed to gain sentience, actively entering the luminous door and returning in the blink of an eye. On each of the paper crane's 2 wings, a drop of silver blood floated, as if countless tiny, transcendentally illusory wheels were rotating, forming a long ribbon, almost connecting at the ends. Taking the 2 drops of the blood of the serpent of fate, Aaron looked at the vanished luminous door and shook his head with a smile. How stingy. He had originally wanted to see what good things Ang Sai Ting, as the Speaker of the Council of Fate, had left for himself before the reboot, but a certain stingy baby wouldn't even let him in. Picking up the paper crane that had fallen to the ground, Aaron glanced at the original location of the luminous door, erased his traces, and then his figure gradually disappeared. Since he had finally come to Backland, it was time to visit Audrey. As a high-level spirit world creature in some sense, Azek did not need divination or other means to determine specific spirit world coordinates. After leaving Lasha Island, he traversed the spirit world following his senses, and soon, an anomaly appeared before his eyes. The originally colorful spirit world now had air currents forming and coiling into wind, roaring and enveloping a vast, boundless area, making the light inside dim and the clouds thick. Moreover, streaks of deeply ominous lightning flashed one after another, illuminating the surrounding scene as if it were the end of the world. At this moment, Azek felt as if he had arrived at an ocean ruled by an unending storm. The great power from Death's fall not only changed the climate of the ocean between the northern and southern continents, filling it with calamities and even earning it the name, Sea of Rage, but more importantly, it broke the barrier between reality and illusion, polluting and destroying the corresponding spirit world, allowing the two sides to erode and influence each other. After pausing for a few seconds, Azek rubbed his brow. Just as he was about to enter that spirit world calamity, his expression changed slightly as if he sensed something, and the corners of his mouth curved up gently. On the Golden Dream, Danit stood at the front of the deck, gazing melancholically at the surging blue sea ahead, finishing the iced light beer in his hand in one gulp, while crew members with similar demeanors almost filled the open space in front of the captain's cabin door. Ferran Ediz leapt from the sea, riding the strong wind to land steadily on the deck. He had been promoted to Wind Blessed for some time and was currently completing the acting to digest the potion. Upon seeing the dense crowd of people at the captain's cabin door, he twitched his mouth, immediately spotting Danitz, and flashed to his side. That crazy adventurer still hasn't come out of the captain's cabin. It was better if he didn't speak. Once he did, it was like lighting a powder keg, and the surrounding crew members all showed indignation. Seeing that the situation was not good, Ferran Ediz wisely changed the subject. Inside the captain's cabin, which was filled with bookshelves, the barrier of the array prevented Klein from hearing the clamor outside the door. Subtly putting down the few pages of Russell's diary collected by Iceberg Admiral, Klein's expression remained unchanged, but his heart was overflowing with joy. Relying on his clown abilities, Klein kept his body from showing any abnormalities. Facing Edwina Edwards' eyes, which could see into the mind, he was about to say something when his body suddenly stiffened. The iron cigarette case, placed close to his chest pocket and showing slight signs of corrosion on its surface, erupted with bone-chilling coldness at this moment. Klein could even feel the slight throbbing of the Azek copper whistle inside. A difficult-to-hide surprise instantly spread across his face. Klein no longer cared about his cool adventurer persona at this moment. He suddenly turned his head, looking towards the back side of the bookshelf following his spiritual intuition. There, various colors suddenly deepened, as if they had been re-outlined with ink by a painter. Immediately after, Azek's figure slowly emerged. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Looking at Klein, who was a new face again, Azek smiled and said gently. When I traversed the spirit world into the Berserk Sea, I sensed his aura. I figured it must be you here, so I specifically came to see you. Guessing that Mr. Azek was referring to the aura of the copper whistle, Klein no longer deliberately maintained his cold demeanor. He pointed to Alger, who was on high alert not far away, and chuckled, saying, "This is Vice Admiral Iceberg. We just reached an agreement to jointly hunt the Vice Admiral of Disease from the Demonist sect." In front of Vice Admiral Iceberg, Klein did not shy away from his close relationship with Azek, precisely to solidify the guess that he had a powerful secret organization backing him. Backed by the intelligence network of the Church of Knowledge, Alger had already recognized this Beander powerhouse, wanted by MI9 in Backland, and nodded warily. Not caring about Alger's wariness, Klein took the initiative to walk in front of Azek, then added to the pirate admiral. The previous agreement is still valid. Once you gather concrete intelligence, I will find the Golden Dream, and we will jointly hunt the Vice Admiral of Disease. Mr. Azek, beside him, grabbed Klein's shoulder, just like last time in Backland, and traversed the spirit world. Symbols flickered in Alger's eyes, as if she wanted to analyze and replicate the spirit world traversal just now. A moment later, she opened the tightly shut captain's cabin door. "Done. who was bickering with Farron Edis, suddenly turned his head. His physical quality at the conspirer level allowed him to perform to his fullest at this moment. In the blink of an eye, he blocked the doorway, his peripheral vision scanning inside the captain's cabin. He's gone. Notify everyone. All crew members' leave is cancelled during this period. Prepare supplies. Next, we're going to the Fog Sea. Such an abrupt decision, yet no one objected. After Dunn responded, he glanced at the empty captain's cabin, then hummed with his hands behind his back. It's a good thing that crazy adventurer with a screw loose ran fast, otherwise you'd be following him as a servant. Before Dunn could finish, Farron Edis seized the opportunity to add. The crew's roaring laughter instantly drowned out Dunn's delayed roar, and the Golden Dream also hoisted its sails amidst the merriment, sailing towards the distance. On a small, densely vegetated island at the edge of the Berserk Sea, Azek led Klein out of the spirit world. Seeing that there were no outsiders, Klein directly removed his faceless disguise, and the loneliness of drifting on the sea also dissipated considerably at this moment. Looking at the chattering Klein, Azek's stern and serious face softened considerably. He beckoned for the human skin glove in Klein's hand and said gently, "This sealed artifact was originally intended as a gift for your protection after you left Backland, but unfortunately, I was injured and fell into a deep sleep in Backland at the time, and what I should have done was not yet complete." As he spoke, the surroundings suddenly deepened, and even the sunlight filtering through the tree canopy instantly disappeared. Pale, eerie green, complex, and bizarre symbols, marks, and patterns appeared out of thin air, as if written by invisible wraiths, shadows, and spiritual beings. They intertwined and combined in midair, evolving into a mysterious, illusory pair of bronze doors, seemingly connecting to another deep, silent world. This illusory door shrank smaller and smaller, like a brand, finally settling on, creeping hunger. A few seconds later, the human skin glove, which had become somewhat restless due to Klein's frequent use, became completely silent. It was still a thin layer, but it no longer had any trace of frenzy or impulse. Handing the human skin glove to Klein, Azek pointed to the brand of the bronze door on the human skin glove and explained. "The souls herded by this shepherd's glove do not have the ability to traverse the spirit world. This is a spirit world traversal array that I arranged for you using the special properties of the underworld. You understand divination, so you should know how to determine specific spirit world coordinates. Use your spirituality to engrave the coordinates on this brand. When you encounter irresistible danger, you can actively traverse the spirit world to escape. But it is important to note that spirit world traversal consumes the power of the underworld that I used to seal this shepherd's glove. Be careful when using it. Is this what it feels like to have a big shot backing you up?" Klein sighed with emotion. After sincerely thanking him, he eagerly put creeping hunger on his left palm. Giving up the urge to try it out, Klein thought for a moment, then looked at Azek with some hope and asked, "I have already digested the faceless Beander potion. Now I only need a mermaid to complete my advancement. Mr. Azek, do you know where there are wild mermaids, besides those raised by the Church of Evernight?" Somewhat surprised by Klein's advancement speed, Azek did not ask further. After thinking for a moment, he slowly nodded under Klein's surprised gaze. Normally, wild mermaids mostly hide in the sea where the Divine War ruins exist, a place where illusion and reality coexist. However, the changes in the Divine War ruins earlier made that sea area almost a forbidden land for living beings, but many Beander races that originally lived in the safer outer regions escaped. Among them are the mermaids you need, and they are now mostly gathered in the sea areas near the Sonia Sea. Hearing the whereabouts of mermaids so clearly for the first time, Klein's previously tense mood also relaxed. Although he was curious about what had happened in the Divine War ruins, his advancement was more important at the moment. The only problem now was how to find those mermaids hidden in the vast sea. Klein glanced at Mr. Azek and suddenly remembered that he could use a mermaid that had become an undead creature to divine the whereabouts of its kin. With the blessing of the mysterious gray fog space, Klein believed this was a feasible plan. If that didn't work, he could also try to summon the magic mirror erodes again. Although he didn't know why this mirror, which had been extremely fawning towards him before, had stopped responding to his summons recently, with his son and Mr. Azek by his side, even if something unexpected happened, he wasn't worried. He told Mr. Azek his idea, and when he saw the mermaid's skeleton emerge from the door of the underworld, Klein's face still twitched. He decisively abandoned the idea of divination. After taking a bone segment from the mermaid, which had become an undead creature at some point, Klein took out the same model of traveler's bag that he had bought from Mr. Emperor for a whopping £1,000, and a brand new telegraph machine dropped out. Klein stopped his actions after engraving the strange symbol for summoning erodes with his own blood on the telegraph machine, which was imbued with the aura of the grey fog. As the bloody symbol merged into the telegraph machine, the surrounding jungle suddenly turned cold and dim, as if the spirit world had merged with reality here. Completely different from the previous lack of response, as soon as Klein raised his hand, the familiar clicking sound began, and illusory white paper timidly emerged. Great, supreme, transcendent master, your loyal, humble, lowly servant Erodes has answered your summons, you. Seeing the flattering address, Klein's face twitched, and he subconsciously glanced at Mr. Azek beside him, feeling a sense of embarrassment like being caught with a bad habit by a parent. He opened his mouth, wanting to explain, but didn't know where to start. Fortunately, the somewhat excited Erodes also sensed Mr. Azek's presence. The illusory white paper paused slightly, and the subsequent, even more embarrassing, flirtatious words did not appear. Instead, it switched to a more normal tone. That cunning and treacherous blasphemer tried to force me to reveal your information, but your loyal servant endured through that inhumane torment, and thus was unable to respond to your summons for a while. Great Master, can Erodes obtain your forgiveness? Amen. Klein's gaze sharpened, but his expression remained inscrutable. He nodded slightly, his mood already extremely grave. A comical stick figure appeared on the illusory white paper, and Erodes responded quite happily. Great Master, thank you for your generosity. Now it's your turn to test Erodes. Placing the mermaid's skeleton in his hand before the telegraph machine, Klein spoke in a low voice. I want to know where all the mermaids who escaped from the God's War ruins to the Sonia Sea are now. The clicking sound of the telegraph machine stopped for a few seconds, then several patterns formed by various distorted symbols quickly appeared on the illusory white paper. Using divination to interpret them, Klein recognized that these pointed to several spirit world coordinates. He nodded in satisfaction, casually answered Erodes's question, and then, staring at the telegraph machine, continued to ask with some anticipation. I want to know the current hidden location of Vice Admiral of Disease. Originally, he had planned to use the forces behind Vice Admiral Iceberg to investigate Tracy, but he didn't expect Erodes, who had been unresponsive to his summons before, to answer this time. He had never forgotten what the Demonist sect did in Backland, and planned to start settling scores with Vice Admiral of Disease after advancing to Marionettist. To Klein's surprise, the illusory white paper trembled violently for a moment, and it was only after a while the text condensed. Great Master, a power has blocked my gaze. Please forgive Erodes's incompetence. Klein frowned. This was not the first time he had encountered a question Erodes could not answer, and it usually meant that at least an angel, or even a god-level power, was influencing the situation. Could it be that Vice Admiral of Disease's disappearance from the Five Seas during this period was actually a return to the Demonist sect's headquarters? This thought involuntarily arose in Klein's mind, and he even felt that it might be related to the lingering effects of the Great Smog in Backland. He did not make things difficult for Erodes, waving his hand and putting away the telegraph machine. Things had to be done step by step, and the most important thing now was to advance. As this thought flashed through his mind, Klein glanced at Mr. Azek, who had a smile on his lips beside him. He hesitated for a moment and did not draw a wall of spirituality to cover his actions, but skillfully set up the sacrificial and bestowal ritual. High-sequence beyonders of the fate pathway and high-level spirit world creatures could perceive anomalies on him to a certain extent, and Mr. Azek, who belonged to the latter, was naturally no exception. This ancient powerhouse, who was both a teacher and a friend, might be able to answer some of the doubts buried in his heart. Passing through layers of murmurs, Klein appeared at the head of the bronze long table, directly summoning the marionettist Beander characteristic left by Rosago from the pile of sundries, as well as the auxiliary materials he had collected at the last pirate gathering. A few seconds later, all that remained was a massive ink-black potion, in which countless tiny, almost invisible worms seemed to be rapidly swimming. Without further delay, Klein returned to the real world with the marionettist potion. The first thing he did was turn his head and meet the gaze of a pair of deep, ancient eyes. Azek stared at Klein intently, a wisp of thin gray-white mist still coiling around his fingertips. After a long time, he raised his hand and patted Klein's shoulder, his gentle voice carrying a hint of complexity. "Saphira Castle. I think I can guess why you are so special. Saphira Castle. Does he mean that mysterious gray fog space?" Feeling the pressure on his shoulder, Klein could clearly hear his increasingly rapid heartbeat, and began to ponder how to subtly ask his questions. Azek withdrew his arm, pinched his brow, and seeing Klein's dilemma, sighed. "My memory is still incomplete. I can only recall some scattered knowledge, so I may not be able to resolve your confusion. That seems to be one of the legacies of the original creator, and to some extent, it is an existence beyond sequence. Beyond sequence, and related to the creator who created the world." Klein's pupils suddenly contracted. He recalled some records in the Revelation of Night, and the City of Silver's creation myth, and thought of his bizarre transmigration and miraculous resurrection. His thoughts were instantly jumbled, and he whispered with some difficulty. "One of, how many more places or items similar to Saphira Castle are there?" Azek frowned slightly, squeezing out incomplete memory fragments from his mind, and placed the wisp of thin gray-white mist in front of Klein, responding with some uncertainty. "There should be 8. This seems to be specifically recorded on the second, blasphemy slate. I once saw these mists outside, Calderon, deep in the spirit world, but that place has become extremely dangerous now. Don't be rash." 8. Klein was stunned for a moment, inexplicably recalling the strange space controlled by the Lord of Disorder. Coming back to his senses, Klein heard the concerned tone and smiled wryly, nodding. He quickly composed himself. No matter what, advancing steadily was what he should be doing most right now. Using the spirit world coordinates provided by Erodes, as soon as Mr. Azek led him out of the spirit world, Klein heard a faint, ethereal song drifting from afar with the waves. On the reef-strewn shallows, figures sat on the edge, their melodious singing echoing. These creatures had human heads, their eyes holding a hint of allure within their purity, their chests swelled high but were covered in dark red scales, and their lower bodies were large fish tails, rhythmically slapping against the reefs. Without acting rashly, after dispelling the mermaids' hostility with the sea god scepter, Klein, under Azek's protection, took out the prepared marionettist potion and drank it in one gulp amidst the melodious singing. In Backland, in Count Hall's study. Count Hall, whose youthful handsomeness had been ruined by his expanding waistline, looked at Aaron, who was sitting beside Audrey, and chuckled relaxedly. Due to the sinking of the ironclad, Prime Minister Aguhide Negan has already submitted his resignation to the King and Parliament. The Conservative Party has truly suffered a severe blow this time. Aaron stroked Susie, who was rubbing against his feet, and glanced at the somewhat melancholic Audrey, knowing that she was probably mourning the sacrifice of the ironclad's crew. But war was like this, and it would only become more brutal in the future. People caught in the currents of the era had no chance to choose their own destiny. Sighing inwardly, Aaron squeezed Audrey's hands and said softly, "Even if Aguhide's resignation is truly accepted, the position of Prime Minister can still only be chosen from the Conservative Party. The most important thing for the new party is to push for the relief efforts for the victims of the Great Smog and those sacrificed ironclad crew members. Regarding the ironclad incident, what is His Majesty the King's attitude?" Count Hall frowned, thought for a moment, and said, "Sadness, but no concrete ideas. However, now, whether it's the noble members of the upper and lower houses, or the common people at the bottom, it's hard to believe that a few self-proclaimed pirate kings could sink an ironclad that was boasted to be invincible. Aaron raised an eyebrow, chuckled disdainfully, and completed the second half of Count Hall's unfinished sentence. Especially since the sinking occurred north of Sonia Island. Count Hall nodded heavily, sighing. Yes, therefore, what's important now is no longer the truth, but what purpose His Majesty the King intends to achieve through this matter. If he wants war, to restart the struggle for Sonia Island, then the news that the so-called pirate kingdom secretly conspired with the Fasak Empire to cause the ironclad's sinking will spread throughout Backland. Noticing the obvious change in Audrey's emotional expression as she had been silently listening, Aaron didn't continue the topic and softly comforted her. LotM's current series of reforms haven't stabilized yet. Even if His Majesty wants to use this to wage war, he doesn't have the capability. At most, it's a form of war propaganda. Looking at the two whispering, Count Hall smiled, got up, and left the study. After a moment of tenderness, Audrey, her face flushed with a slight blush, seemed to remember something, and her emerald-like green eyes sparkled. The hypnotist potion can be fully digested by the end of this month at the latest. I want to prepare for the Dreamwalker advancement ritual in advance. Aaron was not surprised by this. It was already late April, nearly half a year since Audrey advanced to hypnotist. If not for the previous separation of her virtual personality, which required a certain amount of time after advancing to hypnotist to use qualitative psychological suggestion to open the door of her mind-body and eliminate residual hidden dangers, Audrey would have long since completely digested the potion. After informing Audrey of the Dreamwalker potion formula and advancement ritual, Aaron, just about to say something, suddenly saw wisps of dark golden mist appear before his eyes. His heart stirred, and his spirituality connected to his subconsciousness within the nation of disorder, seeing the source of the anomaly. On the stone chair beneath the 9-tiered steps, the dark golden light cluster symbolizing Klein flickered erratically. Thin gray-white mist emerged, instinctively repelling the nation of disorder. Raising his hand to suppress the anomaly, Aaron, whose body was entirely condensed from dark golden mist, raised an eyebrow. The dark golden light cluster rapidly expanded. Is this a mermaid? Klein has advanced to marionettist. Looking at Azek at the edge of the scene, who seemed to have noticed something, Aaron roughly guessed how Klein found these mermaids, but what interested him more was Klein's current state. Under his true vision, he could clearly see a thin layer of gray-white mist, slightly spreading outwards, on Klein's body during his advancement. Looking towards the source of the mist, there was faintly a brilliant light door, tainted with some greenish black. That light door was composed of countless overlapping light spheres, and the body of each light sphere was a pile of twisted worms huddled together. Those transparent worms carried symbols and patterns that were either complex and indescribable or profound in meaning. Aaron, whose body disintegrated and then recondensed, voluntarily cut off his connection with Klein, leaned back against the chair, his expression somewhat peculiar. The harm caused by the repulsion between different Sephira was even greater than consuming potions from non-adjacent pathways. As an angel who controlled the nation of disorder, he was not afraid of these contaminations, but Klein, who had not yet reached demigod status, could not withstand the aftershocks of the nation of disorder's spontaneous counterattack. However, Aaron was mentally prepared for the current situation. After all, as Klein advanced, his control over Sephira Castle also increased, and it would increasingly repel the aura from the nation of disorder that he left on Klein. The only thing he hadn't anticipated was that this change would arrive before Klein even achieved demigod status. His spiritual intuition told him that this was likely related to the last time in the forsaken land of the gods, when the celestial worthies will within the attendant of mysteries characteristic stirred Sephira Castle. A repulsion reaction already appeared at sequence 5. When Klein achieves demigod status and initially grasps Sephira Castle, he will probably be able to detect my true identity. Aaron closed his eyes, sensed the changes in the Sephira, clicked his tongue, and made a judgment in his heart. Several photos tucked away in a corner of the clutter flew up. Aaron looked at the various death poses of Mr. Fool in those photos, a mischievous smile appearing on his face, which then turned solemn and righteous. These treasured little photos can indeed stimulate Klein's humanity, lest he collapses after learning that the so-called transmigration was just an illusion. The illusory figure on the throne disintegrated, and the golden light in Aaron's eyes dimmed as he withdrew his consciousness, beginning to explain the special nature of the Dreamwalker ritual to Audrey. On a desolate island, Azik frowned slightly, looking at Klein, who was trembling all over and even had transparent worms appearing on his body after swallowing the potion. The door of the underworld on his brow flickered with a faint green light. Before he could suppress Klein, who was showing signs of losing control, a gray-white mist, even denser than before, suddenly appeared, forcing a wisp of incongruous dark golden mist out of Klein's body. Before Azik could react, it suddenly rushed into the dark golden token in his hand, which Aaron had given him, engraved with complex patterns. Looking at the token in his hand, whose aura grew deeper, and then at Klein, who was gradually returning to normal, the expression on Azik's face subtly changed. Ignoring the mermaids fleeing in panic in the distance, the space around Azik immediately became colorful. An abstract painting symbolizing the spirit world enveloped Klein, who was either unconscious or asleep. The colorful oil painting world faded, and mermaids emerged from the sea, looking confusedly at the deserted island. The next second, all the mermaids trembled slightly, and a strange smile appeared on their delicate and beautiful faces. They almost simultaneously extended their hands to take out a monocle, placed it nonchalantly in their right eye socket, and their melodious and playful voices echoed. "You ran really fast. But what's the use of that?" Ripples spread through the void, and worms of time crawled out, merging into the strongest mermaid at the forefront. Its flesh twisted and squirmed, finally transforming into Amon's appearance. He pinched the monocle, extended his hand forward again, and strands of grayish-white mist, barely visible to the naked eye, were dragged and condensed by an invisible force, merging into the faintly glowing monocle. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly. "I see you." Azik, who was traversing the spirit world with Klein, suddenly felt an unprecedented sense of dread. Before the door of the underworld in his glabella could open, the Eye of Rusko, which had originally merged into Klein's flesh and blood, suddenly appeared. The divinity of Cavatua, which had been absorbed, was instantly exhausted. A dark tide surged from the depths of his profound pupils, severing the feeling of being spied upon, like a thorn in his back. The 7 pure lights of different colors, containing infinite knowledge, covering the highest point of the spirit world, also shone brightly at this moment. The brilliant light even penetrated the mist of history, vaguely revealing an ancient palace overlooking the boundless grayish-white mist. This area of the spirit world was like it had been disturbed by turbulent currents, and all gazes directed here were deflected by the tide. Swept by that terrifying power, Azik could not care less. He propped up the door of the underworld, grabbed Klein, and rushed towards where his spiritual intuition pointed. Passing through countless indescribably shaped shadows, Azik staggered out of the spirit world, falling straight into the sea and splashing water. Recovering from the chaos brought by the spirit world's fluctuations, Azik, guided by the brass whistle left on Klein, leapt out of the sea and sharply turned his head to look behind him, his brows furrowed. Standing there was a gaunt old man with gray but disheveled hair. His tattered woolen overcoat could not conceal the decaying deathly aura of someone on the verge of death. The unconscious Klein was floating in front of the old man. "Esteemed Death Consul, please allow me to introduce myself. You may call me Tyranny von Hermosius. You can also call me Orange Light, Hilarion, as I am about to die and return to the spirit world." Gently pushing Klein in front of Azik, this avatar of Hilarion politely introduced himself, then sighed and added, "Alas, I can finally witness the great ruler above the spirit world when this body's life reaches its end." Confirming that the Eye of Rusko, which had previously erupted with strange fluctuations in the spirit world, had fallen silent again, Azik subtly shielded Klein behind him and frowned, asking in return, "The great ruler above the spirit world." Pure light peeled off from his decaying body, bit by bit merging into Klein's body. Hilarion smiled and nodded, explaining. In Yellow Lights, prophecy, the great ruler above the spirit world is one of the variables of the apocalypse. Before, I couldn't be entirely sure that he was equivalent to it. After all, there were too many possibilities for him to possess that kind of characteristic. For example, that once favored one, child, or chosen divine messenger. However, now I should be certain. Without stopping the light from merging into Klein's body, Ezek glanced at Hilarion's increasingly shriveled and aged body, and nodded gently. Those lights converged on the back of Klein's right hand, forming a 7-colored ring that enveloped the small square pattern formed by 4 black dots. The grayish-white mist constantly seeping from Klein's body abruptly stopped, and he, who was in a coma, gradually showed signs of waking up. Hilarion finally looked at Ezek and instructed. Although I don't know why Saphira Castle suddenly mutated and attracted Amon's attention, my main body and the other pure lights, with the help of our special connection to the spirit world, disrupted the blasphemer's lock-on. This mark is a blessing formed by our 7 lights using our Beander characteristics, but this is not a long-term solution. Only by advancing as quickly as possible and becoming a demigod can that special characteristic be completely concealed. After explaining the essence of the Dreamwalker ritual to Audrey, Aaron concealed his aura and silently went to St. Samuel's Church. In a quiet corner of the prayer hall, facing the huge Night Holy emblem, Aaron softly recounted the abnormalities brought about by Klein's advancement. After waiting a few seconds, no abnormalities occurred. Aaron stood up, drew a crimson moon on his chest, and his figure merged into the darkness of the church corner, disappearing. North of Serenian, at the junction of the Hornassus Mountains and the central plateau of the northern continent, deep within a 100-mile stretch of black hills, yin power raged and spread. Red scales appeared under the bright moon, reorganizing into a pair of illusory and hazy giant bat wings inscribed with numerous mysterious symbols, opening to form a gateway. Aaron's figure emerged from it. The Ghost Empire ship, sought by various hidden factions, was suspended above the thorny black hills. Upon sensing Aaron's aura, Elvin Gallo's figure appeared under the moonlight. Aaron scrutinized this ancient bane, nodding in satisfaction. Thanks to the incredibly rich yin power of the Moon Country, Elvin Gallo, who had been severely injured from forcibly manipulating the Ghost Empire to cut off the projection of the Mother Tree of Desire's power, had now basically recovered. Elvin Gallo already knew Aaron's intention. His body suddenly swelled, and the Gate of Reincarnation appeared within his split body. Nearly 100 high-sequence undead flew from the Ghost Empire and merged into the deep black vortex. Rich vitality permeated, and the 3 sanguine dukes quietly appeared. After Elvin Gallo's body returned to normal, the youngest, New Moon, Duke Jorna, looked at Aaron and spoke calmly. The Rose School of Thought's strength is greatly diminished now. I hope to go to the southern continent with you. If we can obtain effective intelligence, our Sanguine also plan to seize this opportunity to launch a surprise attack on the Rose School of Thought's headquarters, hoping to seize a holy relic left by our ancestor. And this might require your help. Aaron subtly frowned. The so-called holy relic was likely the key to the Mother Tree of Desire's erosion and mastery of a portion of the Moon Domain's authority. The war sweeping the world was already showing signs, and compared to the Rose School of Thought, which had an outer god behind it, Aaron currently preferred to first deal with the numinous episcopate's artificial death faction, which was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Looking at the 3 sanguine dukes with calm expressions, Aaron was somewhat unsure if this plan had received Lilith's tacit approval, which was why the sanguine had changed their approach, becoming more aggressive to seek greater reliance. Fortunately, everyone present knew each other's background and could be trusted. Aaron no longer concealed anything and directly spoke in a deep voice. Did you receive an oracle? Purple Moon, Liana, who stood in the middle, the strongest and most ancient, did not answer directly. She merely looked up at the sky, at the bright silver moon that covered the entire Moon Nation. Tacit approval, then. Aaron nodded slightly, pondered for a moment, and continued. Then please have Duke Joanna accompany us to the southern continent. We are also secretly collecting information on the Rose School of Thought. The specific situation might be a bit complicated. A smile appeared on Liana's beautiful face. The current true controller of the sanguine waved her hand towards the silver moon in the sky. An incredibly dense yin power, like boiling water, continuously gathered, and a crack appeared on the silver moon. A section of a dark, viscous, seemingly evil liquid flowing brown vine flew out from it. An extremely evil and mad feeling, accompanied by silent roars, began to spread but was quickly enveloped and restrained by the silver moonlight. Liana handed the brown vine, which seemed to have a life of its own and was still wriggling, to Aaron. This is the abomination characteristic derived from Su, which you previously entrusted to be sealed here. I am unable to cleanse the pollution on it and can only temporarily seal it. And since your promotion to angel, your state should have stabilized. This characteristic will return to its rightful owner and can also help you better pinpoint the Rose school of thought. Aaron took the abomination characteristic, sighing inwardly, but he did not decline. Anyway, the nation of disorder now stored so many dangerous sealed artifacts that they could form several mahjong tables, so one more wouldn't make a difference. On the contrary, keeping it with the sanguine was even more dangerous. The historical void image of the crown of stars appeared. Aaron slightly nodded to the other two sanguine dukes, then led New Moon, Duke Joanna and Alwyn Gallo into the door of exile. Southern continent, East Balam, Harvest Plains, north of the Haggarty grassland. An airship was suspended above Valturk, Loan's largest colonial city in East Balam. The huge Evernight holy emblem hanging from it radiated a sense of tranquility, even from a great distance. On a hillside outside the city, Sid Watson, shrouded in a black robe, looked strangely at Dunn Smith, who had been standing there for a long time, not understanding what was wrong with the messenger. Before he could ask, a terrifying aura that made his spirit tremble suddenly appeared. A pair of dark blue double doors emerged in the void in front of him. Aaron emerged from it with two angels and noticed the airship hovering above Valturk City. After sensing it, he raised an eyebrow, then looked at Dunn and said with a smile. Those two Nighthawks from Tingen City are both there now. You yourself should know that the Soul Assurer potion has not been fully digested yet, which is also related to your deep obsession. I can take you to see them. You are now a wanderer without luck, so you don't need to worry about them recognizing you because of this. Alwyn Gallo and Joanna, who were beside him, both observed the Soul Assurer whom Aaron had specially cared for. Even without authority in the corresponding domain, the crushing difference in life level still allowed them to discern the uniqueness about Dunn Smith. The human skin mask on Dunn's face was indifferent and calm, but his body trembled slightly as he responded in a hoarse voice. That is the diocese headquarters, with an archbishop presiding. I have not accomplished anything, so I dare not trouble the attendant. Aaron smiled and waved his hand, stopping Dunn from continuing. No matter. We were going there anyway. Giving you a ride is just a convenience, and it will also make it easier for you to communicate with the Evernight Church later. Saying that, he nodded slightly to Alwyn Gallo. A dense aura of death, carrying an even more surging pressure, spread out, but it was firmly locked within this hillside by a pale golden halo. From his expanding and cracking body, the door to rebirth appeared. Over 100 Truncest royal guards, all sequence and above, streamed out from the deep vortex. The strong aura of death gathered, almost breaking the boundary between life and death, turning this hillside into a netherworld. But soon, these well-trained royal guard specters recovered from the excitement of seeing the light of day again and restrained their surging death aura. Sid Watson stared blankly at the neat, black-armored army of specters. Even the weakest among them was not much different from him. Moreover, there were several specters at the demigod level whose death aura was so dense that he dared not look directly at them. This army of specters will assist you in eradicating the numinous episcopate strongholds you already know about. Besides not being allowed to cause widespread slaughter, I permit you to use all other methods. My only request to you is to seize the numinous episcopate's faith in the southern continent to the greatest extent possible within the shortest time. I will provide you with some necessary assistance. After speaking, without waiting for the solemn-faced Sid Watson, Aaron grabbed Dunsmith and vanished from the hillside. In the depths of the Evernight Church in Valturk City, a lady with beautiful black hair and a delicate face suddenly turned her head. Her deep eyes, containing countless stars, flashed with a dark gleam. It was Iria, a senior deacon of the Nighthawks and the Eye of the Goddess. As one of the 13 archbishops of the Evernight Goddess Church and the head of the East Balam Diocese, her own strength had already reached sequence 3 inches horror bishop. She had sensed an extremely dense and high-ranking aura of death flash by outside the city. An invisible fluctuation emanated from the huge Evernight holy emblem behind her. Iria's expression remained unchanged, but her raised hand had already fallen. This subtle change did not escape others. Only Archbishop Randolph Carter, who was sequence 4, did not sense the fleeting death aura. He was responsible for pursuing Ince Zangwill, having chased him from the northern continent to East Balam, and he thought the Eye of the Goddess had rejected his previous application. Before he could speak, he heard an ethereal and melodious voice. I agree to your request to use the Church's Class 1 sealed artifact to continue pursuing Ince Zangwill. I will personally explain the specific application for its use to the Holy Hall. You may go rest first. A hint of surprise flashed in Randolph's eyes, but he said nothing more. He stood up, drew a crimson moon on his chest, and led the Red Gloves team members out of the depths of the church. Walking at the end of the team, Leonard, whose demeanor was more composed than when he was in Backland, looked back at Eye of the Goddess, sitting beneath the Evernight holy emblem, then quickly took 2 steps forward to catch up with Miss Daly, who was walking at the front of the team. The sound of light footsteps echoed through the deep, quiet corridor. Leonard glanced at Archbishop Randolph Carter, who was at the very front, and couldn't help but lower his voice to whisper. I always feel like His Grace, the Eye of the Goddess, is deliberately hiding something from us. Daly, dressed in a black hooded robe with blue eyeshadow and blush, giving her an exotic and cold beauty, shot Leonard a look as if he were an idiot. Some things are better left unsaid, everyone understands them in their hearts. If you insist on speaking them aloud, do you really think that at such a close distance, a demigod's spiritual perception wouldn't notice? Stopping the chuckle that rose to her throat, Daly pursed her lips. That's not something we should be concerned about. All I want to know now is where Ince Zangwill is hiding after escaping to the southern continent. As the two exchanged words, Archbishop Randolph Carter, who was walking at the very front, stopped. A middle-aged man in a bishop's robe drew a crimson moon on his chest and respectfully said, Praise the Goddess, Your Grace, please follow me. The sealing process has been lifted, and that Grade 1 sealed artifact can now be awakened. Randolph Carter nodded and said in a deep voice to Leonard and the other Red Gloves team members. Rest up quickly. Once we borrow this sealed artifact, we will continue our journey. He then followed the bishop around the corner and walked towards the even deeper underground. Even without the archbishop leading the way, the elite Red Gloves team, all of whom were mid-sequence beyonders, received extremely high-level treatment. After leaving the core area, many clergy members voluntarily stepped aside to make way. Daly, who was contemplating how to earn merits to exchange for the opportunity to advance to gatekeeper, inadvertently glanced at a middle-aged gentleman passing by, and her expression suddenly became dazed. Under Leonard's somewhat puzzled gaze, Daly suddenly turned her head, savoring the familiar feeling that permeated her soul, but the place she looked at was empty. Leaning against the wooden door of the prayer room, Dunn slowly sat down. After a long while, the corners of his mouth slightly curved up, and he silently uttered a sentence. Long time no see. At this moment, the last bit of the soul assurer potion that had bothered him for a long time was finally completely digested. In the vast and silent hall, the Eye of the Goddess, Ilia, no longer had the calm expression she had before. She stood up and bowed respectfully, which was the most basic respect for an angel on earth. Good afternoon, honored sir. Are you here for Ince Zangwill? Aaron withdrew his gaze from the huge Evernight holy emblem, smiled, and waved his hand, instructing. Ince Zangwill's matter has its own arrangements. My visit to the southern continent this time must be kept secret for now. I came to find you proactively this time mainly for two things. Firstly, I just brought a large army of undead. You might have sensed it just now. I specifically informed the church to avoid any unnecessary misunderstandings. Secondly, I hope to obtain information from the church regarding the numinous episcopate's various hidden strongholds in East Balam. I plan to carry out a secret cleanup. A look of understanding flashed across Ilya's face. In the darkness surging behind her, specks of starlight appeared, solidifying and flying into Aaron's hand. The remaining death faith in the native areas of East Balam is still deeply entrenched, especially among the native rebel forces, almost all of whom have received funding from the numinous episcopate. This is the intelligence continuously collected by the church's embedded informants over the years. Do you need me to send people to act together? With a slight sweep of his spirituality, the information contained within the starlight quickly appeared in his mind. Aaron nodded in satisfaction and chuckled. That won't be necessary. I will make it appear as an internal conflict within the numinous episcopate, which will also make it easier to take over those rebel forces secretly believing in death. Additionally, I brought a soul assurer who is about to advance. You should still have a spare spirit warlock characteristic here. After he advances, he will be responsible for the secret contact between the undead army and the church. Ilya nodded respectfully. After Aaron's figure completely disappeared, she slightly raised her hand, and a subtle fluctuation immediately spread outwards. A moment later, a woman in a clerical robe respectfully emerged from the shadows, holding a crystal that resembled a heart, deep black in color, and covered in pores. Your Grace, the Eye of the Goddess, in accordance with your wishes, the special application to borrow the Grade 1 sealed artifact has been sent to the cathedral, and the spirit warlock characteristic has also been retrieved. Ilya nodded calmly, picked up the characteristic, and looked towards a certain prayer room, following the sensation. The afterglow of dusk sprinkled on the sea. A whale-shaped undead creature slowly moved forward, breaking through the wind and waves. On its wide back, Azek, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, seemed to sense something. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Klein, who had been unconscious for 2 days. As if he had experienced a long dream, Klein, who had regained control of his body from the endless depressive sounds, struggled to get up. He muttered to himself with some confusion and lingering fear. I lost control. As he spoke, he weakly pinched his glabella. The double vision in front of his eyes still hadn't fully returned to normal, and he could vaguely see a brilliant door stained with a hint of dark green. After repeatedly confirming that Klein had no major problems after waking up, Azek's tightly furrowed brows quietly relaxed, and he smiled, shaking his head. Meeting Klein's somewhat puzzled gaze, Azek did not hide anything and simply repeated what Orange Light, Hilarion had said. Hearing that Eamon had almost tracked him down while he was unconscious, Klein nearly jumped up, but quickly restrained the impulse and noticed a shriveled corpse lying beside him. This was Tyrannik von Hermosius. Klein, who had been a detective in Backland for a period, recognized this great scientist, who was wanted by the Loan Kingdom, at a glance. He never expected him to be the real-world incarnation of Orange Light, Hilarion. Is this the blessing of the 7 lights of the spirit world? Klein carefully looked at the colorful halo encircling the 4 black dots on the back of his right hand. Finding nothing, he simply stopped bothering with it, sat cross-legged, and closed his eyes to feel the changes brought about by advancing to marionettist. After a long while, Klein opened his eyes with a strange expression. With such a bizarre ability, Rosago back then had completely lost the prestige of a marionettist. After muttering to himself, Klein took a deep breath and looked at Azek, respectfully asking. Respected Mr. Azek, what are your plans next? Manipulating the giant whale beneath his feet to change direction, Azek smiled and pointed to the faint outline of an island on the distant horizon. First, I'll find an island to bury his bones. Once your spirituality is completely stable, I will continue my journey to search for my lost memories. Beyond the safe sea lanes of the raging sea, in the Calamity Straits, the rampant storms almost blurred the line between reality and the spirit world. Dark clouds piled up, and streaks of deep, gloomy lightning flashed one after another, illuminating a massive, dark, and somber sailboat with an eerie greenish glow. On its pale mainsail was depicted a blooming, pitch-black tulip. It was none other than the flagship of Admiral of Hell, Ludwell, the Black Tulip. Unlike the raging storm outside, the deck of the Black Tulip was remarkably calm. Ludwell knelt on the deck, his silver-white mask, which obscured his features and contours, now extremely dim, in his tightly clenched right hand. The deep black death ring was erupting with terrifying suction. Standing beneath the sail, Ince Zangwill, with a strange smile on his face, instantly had his eyes turned pitch black, as if stained with ink, and sinister patterns extended little by little, forming strange and twisted mystical symbols. Accompanied by a low murmur of suppressed madness, his waist and ribs swelled under his clothes, and flesh squirmed, revealing 4 skinless arms entwined with blood vessels. These arms quickly became covered in white feathers, and a deathly aura rippled outwards. Ince Zangwill, having activated his incomplete mythical creature form, took out half a pure white skull from the bronze double door at his glabella. It was the remaining half of a Death Descendant's skull from his promotion to Nightwatcher. Firmly grasping a pure white quill in his hand, Ince Zangwill let out the mocking chuckle of the Red Angel evil spirit, but his actions did not stop. He wrote a few sentences on the half-skull, then unhesitatingly threw it towards Ludwell. A more terrifying suction, accompanied by bone-chilling cold, erupted centered around that ring left by death, causing the Admiral of Hell, who had been barely holding on to a kneeling position, to directly prostrate himself on the ground, his bones cracking audibly. In the deep, storm-ravaged ocean, translucent, semi-illusory, hideous creatures crawled out, and pale corpses extended their hands, dangling with strips of rotting flesh. Flames, some deep red, some chillingly cold, which even hurricanes could not extinguish, emerged, forming pairs of eyes. Suddenly, this place seemed to transform into the entrance to hell, with all sorts of undead creatures crowding and surfacing, rushing like a tide, one after another, into the increasingly deep, dark ring. The burden of forcibly using 008 to write fate directly caused the Red Angel evil spirit to lose control of its body, and Ince Zangwill, having regained control, looked gloomy and quickly exited his incomplete mythical creature form. Looking at the black ring, which had swallowed an unknown number of specters and resentful spirits and was gradually emitting a strange heartbeat, Ince Zangwill's brow twitched violently, and a vague sense of dread intensified. He decisively abandoned the idea of spirit world traversing here and leapt from the deck, rushing out of the Calamity Straits. To the east of the raging sea, on Zemim Island, the furthest point of the Rorstad archipelago. Klein was curiously manipulating the several marionettes he had just acquired. These were all sea god believers on Zemim Island who still adhered to bloody sacrifices, and from them, he also learned about the current situation of those sea god believers. Azek, who was sitting cross-legged not far away, suddenly opened his eyes and looked west, a hint of anger flashing across his deeply contoured face, and he coldly uttered a name. Ince Zangwill. After that snow-white skull was completely consumed, he felt the call from his own bloodline, and this familiar sensation instantly reminded him of the thief who stole his child's skull in Tingen City. Hearing this name, Klein immediately stopped what he was doing, flashed to Azek's side, and asked with some surprise. "Mr. Azek, you sensed his aura." After witnessing the power of 008 twice in Tingen and Backland, he had been troubled by how to track this Nightwatcher, never expecting to get information from Azek. After receiving Azek's affirmative reply, Klein took a deep breath, took out the sea god scepter from Rusko's eye, and allowed Azek to grasp his shoulder, entering the colorful spirit world. Southern continent, Harvest Plains. Sid Watson rubbed his eyes, carefully scrutinizing Dunn Smith, whom he hadn't seen for only 2 days, and after a long moment, he spoke incredulously. "You've been promoted to Spirit Warlock." Dunn Smith nodded, glanced at a group of strangely dressed people not far away, and responded indifferently. "Just by luck." "Who are those people?" Sighing with some envy, Sid Watson lowered his voice. "Those are members of the Life School of Thought. Besides clearing out the numinous episcopate, we also need to help them clean up those traitors who joined the Rose School of Thought. The old man leading them, wearing a black eye patch, is even a demigod. Bringing Dunn back with him, Aaron glanced at Councilman Richard, who had arrived from the northern continent, and casually set up a spiritual wall to isolate external perception, then pointed to Duke Joanna, New Moon, beside him. I promised your speaker before that I would help her clear out those traitors who joined the Rose School of Thought. This is one of the 3 Dukes of the Sanguine. She needs to collect some information on the Rose School of Thought, so she will act with you. Even with the eye patch, Richard still bowed towards Joanna, seemingly unsurprised that the Sanguine would be involved in this matter. Aaron raised an eyebrow, somewhat suspecting whether Ang-Sai-Ting had glimpsed something in the River of Fate. Suppressing the thoughts in his mind, the projection of the star crown appeared, and Aaron's figure instantly vanished, directly roaming to Bernadette's Emerald Palace. After handing Bernadette the blood of the Snake of Fate he had obtained from Ang-Sai-Ting, Aaron then asked, "How is that ferryman doing now?" Sealing the silver blood, which contained countless wheels, into the Wheel of Fortune card, Bernadette nodded gently, and her right hand slightly lifted. Colorful peach blossoms fell, and the figure of Alsace Egis emerged from them. Although his aura was still weak, the originally dilapidated inner underworld within his body had already been repaired. Nodding with satisfaction, Aaron pointed his finger at the ferryman's glabella, and wisps of dark golden mist seeped from his fingertip into the half-open door of the underworld. Alsace Egis stood calmly in place, not attempting to resist, and after the terrestrial angel withdrew his finger, he spoke on his own initiative. "The pollution from the artificial death on me has been cleared by the Pale Queen, so even if my injuries are not fully healed, I will not fall because of it. If you need me to, I can take you into Manuel, the city of the undead, right now." Aaron nodded in satisfaction. It seemed Azek's earlier appearance had made the ferryman abandon some unrealistic ideas, saving him the trouble of further persuasion. After receiving and sealing the blood of the Serpent of Fate, Bernadette immediately summoned her messenger. While handing the drop of blood to the messenger, she took Pale Death and threw it directly into the still unclosed Peach Blossom Spring. Even if that former archpriest of the Death Church was severely wounded by a forbidden attempt and could only be confined to the mausoleum, he was still a genuine death consul. Not only was he acutely sensitive to high-sequence characteristics of the death pathway, but the 1,000+ years of sacrifices to the artificial death could easily cause Pale Death to undergo an anomaly. Therefore, not only this Grade 0 sealed artifact, but also Alwyn Gallo, who had the Door of Rebirth embedded in his body, Aaron did not intend to let them participate. After all, he and Bernadette were enough to deal with a half-crippled angel. The historical projection of the star crown above his head reappeared. Aaron slightly raised his right hand, and countless brilliant starlights immediately emerged from the void. These starlights quickly converged, forming an ancient, deep blue door. Arsace Egis felt the tremor within the spirit world, took a deep breath, and actively stepped into that starlight portal. The vast cosmos flashed past his eyes like fleeting glimpses, yet he had no mood to appreciate these scenes, which were completely different from traversing the spirit world. Feeling the spiritual tremor, he closed his eyes. When the feeling of palpitation subsided, Arsace Egis opened his eyes again, and what greeted him was the abyss of ferrying, spanning hundreds of kilometers and enveloped in black mist. From above, it looked like an impossibly massive feathered serpent stretching its body. Having ended his wandering and standing above the void, Aaron, also overlooking that black mist world, had his pupils completely turn golden red. Unlike Arsace Egis, who was merely a ferryman, Aaron, with the help of the Hand of Order, characteristic within the Nation of Disorder, could, to some extent, temporarily rival a king of angels, clearly seeing the illusory black tendrils hidden within the mist. Had the artificial death's erosion of this place reached this extent? Or had Hyder deliberately indulged it, intending to use it to sacrifice this former headquarters of the Death Church at a crucial moment? Aaron, having deciphered certain information, his eyes slightly narrowed in thought, and he stopped Bernadette, who was about to gaze into the abyss of ferrying with her eye of peering. That black mist is related to the artificial death. Rashly peering into its source will cause you to be corrupted and easily alert them. Having timely curbed Bernadette's strong desire for exploration, Aaron gestured for Arceus Aegis to begin preparations. Looking at the familiar yet strange black mist world, Arceus Aegis took a deep breath, his fingertip tracing his brow, and 2 drops of dark green blood flew out. Before the god fell, only those who obtained the church's recognition or were blood descendants of the Aegis family could enter the headquarters, otherwise, they would sink into the river Styx. Aaron nodded, allowing the drop of blood to transform into a twisted, abstract pattern in his palm. This seemed to be the emblem of the Aegis family from the 4th epoch. Concealing his aura and entering a semi-hidden state, Aaron, with Bernadette transformed into a torrent of information, followed Arceus Aegis into the abyss of ferrying. Amidst the dense black mist, Aaron's perception of the spirit world was instantly weakened, with a very strong sense of disconnection. According to the information provided by Arceus Aegis, the abyss of ferrying, or rather, its most core part, the city of the undead, Manuel, was the convergence point of the underworld and reality. However, it had now been unilaterally cut off by the Pale Queen who occupied the underworld. If he could quietly occupy this place with the least cost, the underworld. Aaron's eyes flickered slightly, and he felt a certain anticipation in his heart. Pale or dark green hellfire brought some light to this black mist world. As the 1 person and 2 angels delved deeper, a gasping sound, as if directly echoing from the depths of their souls, gradually grew louder. The raging sea, the calamity strait, where the spirit world and reality nearly merged. As the last half of Azek's bloodline skull completely integrated, the words written by 008 also merged into the ring left by death. The undead creatures crawling out from an unknown place beneath the sea, one after another, merged into the constantly expanding, nearly collapsing dark, sunken ring, and wisps of pale flames ignited out of thin air. Admiral of Hell, Ludwell, prostrate on the deck and completely turned into a mummy, was enveloped by the pale flames before he could even make a sound, swallowing him along with the Black Tulip ship. All the surrounding scenery suddenly collapsed inwards, forming a boundless, slowly rotating darkness vortex, as if alive, carrying a terrifying suction force towards a certain direction. In the spirit world, with its rich, vivid, and overlapping colors, color blocks rapidly flashed past. Azek led Klein quickly into the raging sea area, where a dark storm swept and faint lightning flashed. Suddenly, Azek abruptly stopped. Klein, somewhat surprised, turned his head, only to see Mr. Azek's facial lines tightly strained, his expression seemingly dazed, and not a hint of an extra curve on his lips. Before Klein could ask what had happened, the exquisite and ancient Azek copper whistle on his chest flickered with light. An indescribably bone-chilling coldness made Klein, who had already become a marionettist, shiver, and his spirituality began to wildly warn him. This, Death Consul, who had survived the 4th epoch suddenly grabbed Klein's shoulder. A dense aura of death slid across his body, seemingly wanting to activate the mark left by the 7 lights to send Klein away. But it was already too late. The spirit world, which had been relatively normal, was almost instantly replaced by a slowly rotating, boundless darkness vortex. Azek's body suddenly stiffened. The next second, he, along with Klein, was swallowed by the vortex. At the same time Azek disappeared into the vortex, at the very center of the city of the undead, Manuel, the base camp of the numinous Episcopate's artificial death faction. At the source of the illusory, pitch-black river, waves instantly surged. Deep within the black mausoleum, which was inverted and embedded in the ground, an invisible, chilling wind surged out from the many open coffins. Skulls with flickering pale flames danced, and endless screaming and roaring souls clustered around the source of death, that deep vortex formed by pitch-black coffins. Medici. An ancient, icy voice, which seemed to tear one's soul directly from their body, suddenly exploded, filled with undisguised fury, echoing throughout the entire black mist world. Even through the mist, which was almost solidified, Aaron, who had quietly approached the city of the undead, Manuel, still heard that furious roar, and his figure paused slightly. The angry roar caused the entire abyss of ferrying to tremble slightly, and the entire world of black fog seemed to sink along with it, thinning significantly as if being swallowed by a whale. Confirming that the anomaly was not caused by their exposure, Aaron, wearing the star crown, quietly conjured the sun-chasing scepter in his hand. This level 0 sealed artifact from the sun pathway was extremely effective against the death pathway. Although he didn't know why Hater suddenly called out Medici's name, Herod's Aegis was definitely in his weakest state now and couldn't withstand an attack from the Red Angel's evil spirit. Fortunately, this anomaly, which affected the entire abyss of ferrying, also allowed Aaron to pinpoint, City of the Undead, Manuel. His true vision pierced through the increasingly thin black fog, revealing the city with its distinct ancient LotM Empire characteristics. The Styx, connecting life and death, was completely ignited by ghostly flames. The enormous, inverted black mausoleum in the center of the city, embedded in the ground, was like a giant beast opening its mouth, frantically devouring the black fog and the endless undead trapped in Manuel, unable to enter the underworld. Is that guy crazy? Bernadette, who had returned to human form, frowned and said indifferently, observing the almost self-destructive actions, but a simple spear stained with mottled blood appeared in her hand. At this point, there was no need to worry about alerting the enemy. The sage's prophecy of fate told Bernadette that if Hater wasn't stopped soon, it could lead to a disaster. Aaron, connected to the Nation of Disorder, immediately sensed an anomaly in the contingency he had placed on Azek, and his expression turned grave. After confirming that the Red Angel was not here by severing Zangwill's arm in Tingan City, Aaron sent a message to Alvin Gallo, who was on standby in the harvest plains of eastern Balam. There was no longer any need for restraint. He instructed this ancient bane to directly seal this spirit world space. Aaron intended to achieve his goal in one fell swoop, wiping out all the artificial death pathway beyonders. The subconsciousness, seated on the throne in the magnificent palace within the Nation of Disorder, sighed as he watched the violently trembling dark gold star above the dome. He drew the Black Emperor card and the Justiciar card from a pile of sundries, sending them towards the star with surging power. He could achieve consciousness communication through the Nation of Disorder's authority, and with a suitable medium, he could perform a weakened version of a divine descent ritual. Although he was unsure why this unexpected event occurred despite his specific warning to Azek not to go to the Raging Sea during this period, what was done was done. Now, the most important thing was how to maximize the benefits. He needed to ensure that the Evernight Goddess could successfully obtain the death uniqueness and also digest the Balancer potion as much as possible through this opportunity. The bone-chilling coldness from his chest almost froze Klein's spirit body. The last things in his consciousness were Azek's somewhat distorted face, a devouring black vortex, and an indescribable illusory gasp. After an unknown period, he slowly recovered, finding himself in a dark, cold mausoleum. Around him were open coffins, each containing a rotting corpse with white feathers growing from its back. The Azek copper whistle on his chest was still bone-chillingly cold, but thanks to this item, Klein's aura was concealed, causing the undead creatures in the sarcophagi to overlook the unconscious Klein. Cautiously getting up, Klein's gaze swept around, searching for Mr. Azek's figure, finally resting on the deepest part of the mausoleum. The black fog lingering there no longer gasped, slowly dispersing, and the illusory entity coiled at the bottom gradually revealed itself. It was a feathered serpent so massive it seemed capable of occupying an entire island. It had huge, dark green scales that appeared black, with faint yellowish oiled feathers growing from the gaps. From each feather, an illusory black thin tube extended. This exaggerated feathered serpent was both illusory and real, its more specific shape difficult to describe, seemingly composed of something beyond human comprehension. Pale flames burned in its eye sockets, and its face was a human face. That face had bronze skin, soft features, and a tiny black mole below its right ear. It was clearly another Azek Aegis. Upon seeing the feathered serpent coiled in the depths of the black fog, and the face at the top of its mountain-like body, Klein's expression instantly became blank. The next second, his eyes exploded, turning into bloody hollows. In this intense pain, disjointed images flashed through Klein's mind. The feathered serpent's face, identical to Azek's, even in minute details, coldly gazed at a desolate land covered by countless pale corpses. A white feather stained with faint yellowish oil drifted down, cutting the transparent spirit body with Azek's face into two parts. One part suddenly flew up, entering a black, turbulent world, while the remaining part merged with a golden ornament that appeared out of thin air, returning to flesh and blood amidst the scorching pale flames. Such a scene was like having his spirit body struck by lightning. Klein, who had directly gazed upon a complete mythical creature form, could no longer endure the pain. Having just gotten up, he collapsed once again, kneeling on the steps. "You're a seer, not a reckless fool. If I weren't here, you'd probably have stared yourself to death." A slightly helpless, teasing voice echoed in the depths of Klein's somewhat chaotic consciousness. A warm, even scorching, aura dispelled the soul-penetrating chill. "Mr. Emperor." Klein, returning from the brink of losing control, took a deep breath and instinctively turned his head towards the source of the voice, only to see darkness. Recalling the pain he had just experienced, Klein had already guessed the fate of his eyes. His face twitched, one hand pressing his forehead, the other his chest. Watching Klein's continuous attempts, Aaron, whose figure was somewhat illusory, sighed and threw the mummified Admiral of Hell, Ludwell onto the ground, reminding him. "This is a wound formed by divine contamination. A magician's damage transfer has no effect on such injuries. After we leave here, you can use Rusko's eye to devour that contaminated divinity. You are already a marionettist. This guy should just be a pawn, but fortunately, his spirit body threads haven't completely dissipated, so you should be able to turn him into a marionette." Klein awkwardly lowered his arms and fumbled to touch the mummified corpse on the ground. In a few breaths, he transformed the dormant Ludwell into a marionette. Using the marionette to regain his sight, Klein didn't even have time to see what his new marionette was. The images from peering at the complete mythical creature form flashed through his mind, and he immediately looked anxiously at Aaron. "Mr. Azek is part of the numinous episcopate's artificial death." Klein's voice abruptly stopped. Through the shared perspective of the marionette, he noticed that Aaron's current state was extremely bizarre. Not only was his body covered in dark, cold scales, but he was also pierced by illusory thin tubes emerging from the black mist. "No matter. I'm well aware of Azek's situation. Take out the Rusko's eye that the Evernite goddess bestowed upon you earlier." Waving his hand indifferently to indicate he was fine, Aaron looked at his increasingly ethereal body and couldn't help but sigh. The death pathway's uniqueness had basically been activated, filled with an extreme coldness and madness. If it were to reunite with Azek now, he would likely immediately become a pseudo-death with only divinity and no humanity. However, the Evernite goddess, who should have appeared long ago, remained silent. This abnormality made Aaron suspect that the turmoil in the raging sea had caused some issues in the astral world. His main body was still far away in the abyss of ferrying, eliminating Heidel. Relying solely on this pseudo-divine descent clone, he could only temporarily swap fates with Azek using the fortune stealer charm, directly transferring the influence of the artificial death onto the nation of disorder, which served as the medium for the divine descent clone. Although the residual pollution still caused irreversible changes in Aaron's body, to his surprise, appeasing the balancer and the half of Azek's soul that had merged with the death uniqueness helped him digest a lot of his balancer, Beander characteristic. The only problem was that the fortune stealer charm had limited effectiveness, and this pseudo-divine descent clone alone couldn't prevent Azek from merging with the death uniqueness. Although he wasn't entirely sure what Aaron wanted to do, Klein still exhaled a long breath and took out Rusko's eye, which was hidden in his flesh, accompanied by a strong sense of powerlessness. Even though he had advanced to Sequence 5, he would suffer severe injuries just by opening his eyes to look at Mr. Azek's current state and what he was encountering. This was not a problem that could be solved by courage alone, it was a difference in Beander characteristic level, an unbridgeable gap. Just then, Klein suddenly heard an extremely familiar scream of pain. Almost instinctively, he turned his head, and through Ludwell's vision, Klein saw Mr. Azek kneeling on one knee at the bottom of the tiered sarcophagi, not far from that indescribable feathered serpent. Drops of sweat slid down Azek's forehead, hitting the stone slab in front of him, spreading a thin layer of yellowish oil and growing fine white fuzz. His forehead suddenly bulged as if alive, then split open, revealing a bloody gash. A golden light then emerged from nothingness, taking shape within the flesh. This was an ancient golden ornament, shaped like a slender bird, surrounded by wings made of pale flames. Inside its bronze eyes, layers of light formed a mysterious and illusory door. The fortune stealer charm had failed. Aaron, beside him, also changed his expression slightly, cursed under his breath, and somewhat suspected whether the dice of probability, sealed within the nation of disorder, had taken the opportunity to affect him with its terrifying bad luck. "Close your eyes," Aaron roared, no longer bothering with Klein. His figure dispersed and reformed, having already forcefully pressed Rusko's eye onto Azek's forehead, blocking the bird-shaped golden ornament that was trying to fly out of the flesh crack. Inside Azek's ancient eyes, two pale flames suddenly ignited. Looking at Aaron, who was blocking him, he let out a pained roar, unable to hide his agony. "Don't mind me. Quickly take Klein and escape from here." Aaron glanced at Klein, who was fumbling his way towards them not far away, shook his head helplessly, and ignited the divinity of this quasi-divine descent clone, merging it into the last remaining eye of the demonic wolf, Phlegre. The illusory yet real feathered serpent deep within the black mist straightened its body, extended its head, and met the gaze of Rusko's eye, which was slightly rotating and shimmering with golden light. The entire mausoleum suddenly began to vibrate, and the surroundings became transparent, revealing an illusory world with countless skeletons and specters. Bloody arms, black-green vines with infant faces, and slimy tentacles penetrated the boundary between reality and illusion, reaching into the mausoleum, yet they clung tightly to the ground, not daring to move. Aaron's rapidly fading figure paused slightly, stopping his almost collapsing form, and looked at a beautiful lady outlined through the illusory world between Azek and the mountain-like illusory feathered serpent. This was the Mother of the Sky, sealed beneath St. Samuel's Church in the Backland Diocese, the Evernight Goddess's divine descent vessel. Finally caught up, Aaron's expression relaxed slightly. He didn't have time to ask what accident had occurred and immediately turned sideways, casually taking the constantly wriggling Rusko's eye. The bird-shaped golden ornament on Azek's forehead immediately became agitated, and pale flames spread fiercely, but it was then pressed down by a slender, fair hand. The mountain-like illusory feathered serpent showed a look of fear for the first time. In the deepest part of the abyss of ferrying, city of the undead, Manuel suffered the greatest destruction in over 1,000 years since the fall of death during the Pale Disaster. The desperate battle of three angels, or rather, Aaron and Bernadette's one-sided crushing of Heidel, brought this ancient city to the brink of collapse. Once again scattering the monstrous feathered serpent into black mist, the sun scepter in Aaron's hand surged with endless light, as if it had suddenly transformed into the sun descending into reality. Accompanied by Heidel's painful and angry roars, clumps of greenish-tinged Beander characteristics were forcibly stripped away. Even so, Heidel stubbornly continued to reform his body. Having witnessed the terrifying vitality of a death pathway angel, Aaron raised an eyebrow and casually collected the Beander characteristics, which were at most demigod level, but his expression became relaxed. Through the nation of disorder, he had synchronized the consciousness of his pseudo-divine descent clone and already knew of the Evernight Goddess's arrival, so he no longer needed to risk exposing some of his trump cards to maintain the situation. Ignoring Heidel's malicious curses, the special environment of the abyss of ferrying allowed him to have no qualms. Moreover, the higher-ups of the church and various national forces should now be focused on the raging sea. Aaron patiently wore down this half-crippled death console, little by little. Alvin Garo, who had sealed the spirit world near the abyss of ferrying, followed the light of the sun scepter and found Aaron, breaking through the much thinner black mist. The slowly wriggling black thorns on his body were entwining several figures, who were precisely the high-ranking members of the Artificial Death faction who had tried to escape by spirit world traversing during the chaos. One ferryman, two undying. Aaron slightly tilted his head, scanning these figures, pausing for a few seconds on Patrick Blaine, whose aura was the weakest. The byproduct of the Artificial Death plan was in an extremely poor state, whether due to the anomaly in the raging sea or the backlash from previously serving as a medium for Hyder's power. Ignoring the malevolent gaze of the ferryman within, Aaron glanced at Alphas Agers, who had witnessed the entire battle from nearby. In front of him, Aaron directly thrust the scepter of the sun into the black mist that could no longer reassemble itself. Dazzling, pure light ascended, completely shattering Hyder's internal underworld. A phantom feathered serpent with pale flames flickering was forcibly stripped from the black mist. Sealing and suppressing this pure death console characteristic, Aaron looked at Hyder, who had lost all characteristics but had transformed into a wraith due to the unique evolution of the death pathway. He snorted lightly, not immediately moving to completely obliterate him. Such a high-level wraith, closely connected to the artificial death, was a crucial step in helping Azek recover. Aaron raised his hand and suppressed him within the nascent divine kingdom. Only then did he look at the collapsed inverted pyramid mausoleum at the very center of Manuel, the city of the undead. Streams of information, imperceptible to the naked eye, continuously converged, reforming Bernadette's body. Behind her, a pair of indifferent, lashless eyes appeared. The next second, the eye of peeping instantly became even deeper, briefly losing focus, as a torrent of terrifyingly complex information crashed into the Styx River that submerged the ruins of Manuel. An ancient, double-leafed bronze door then appeared faintly in the deepest part of the Styx River, covered with countless indescribable symbols, unmoving under the scouring of the information torrent. The Styx River, which had originally returned to calm, once again ignited with eerie green flames, casting a chilling gloom around. A pale light, tinged with dark green, suddenly spread, and a bronze door, covered with mysterious patterns and seemingly the source of endless deathly silence, slowly emerged from the deepest part of the Styx River. This is the true passage that can connect reality with the underworld divine kingdom, and also the origin point where life and death converge. Even though the passage was unilaterally sealed by the Pale Queen, it could still help the severely injured Hyder maintain his state. Witnessing the easy annihilation of the Artificial Death faction, Alphas Agers wisely took the initiative to explain. Aaron nodded, stopping Bernadette, who wanted to continue trying to break through the seal. A black jar radiating rich vitality quietly appeared. Drops of crimson blood, like fragmented gems, floated out. Guided by Aaron's will, these blood samples from the 22 Beander pathways moved through the void. After a few breaths, a complex symbol composed of layered doors leapt forth. The layered door formed by blood vibrated slightly, seemingly forming some peculiar resonance with the bronze door beneath the Styx River. A phantom creaking sound echoed, revealing a deep, dim world through the opened crack. Aaron's eyes narrowed slightly. He quietly mobilized the nation of disorder and that hand of order characteristic. The aura approaching the King of Angels level was released without reservation, mixed with the aura of the Evernight goddess's mark. In the very center of the underworld, within the mottled palace covered with feathers, the pure black sarcophagus placed on the central platform of the palace quietly opened. A pale queen, Sia Palenque Agers, wearing a dark black robe embroidered with gold threads and a golden bird-shaped crown, stood up. Her features were soft, with distinct South Continent characteristics, yet she gave off an extremely vague, eerie, and terrifying feeling. At this moment, her expression remained unchanged, instead showing a hint of relief. Her eyes quickly deepened into black, and pale lines emerged, outlining an extremely complex and mysterious three-dimensional symbol. It was like a bird with abnormally long feathers, or a coiled feathered serpent. The entire underworld seemed to tremble. The stone walls and floor tiles inside the palace began to weather, at a speed so rapid it was as if they had experienced thousands or tens of thousands of years of erosion in just 1 or 2 seconds. They quickly became mottled, constantly dropping fragments or having dust blown up by the wind, while tiny, pale downy feathers grew in the cracks. These downy feathers, in the blink of an eye, grew into white feathers, their surfaces seemingly soaked with light yellow oil stains, then disintegrated into pale light tinged with dark green. The strange three-dimensional symbol, having absorbed the surrounding light, quickly materialized, then detached from Sia Palenque Agers's eyes, unfolded its body, and flew towards the forcibly opened door of the underworld. An indifferent whisper, audible only to Aaron, echoed. "This is a portion of the underworld's authority. Please hand it over to the Evernight goddess. The karma from 1,000 years ago ends here." Looking at the three-dimensional symbol that vanished into the Evernight goddess's mark in a blink of an eye, Aaron nodded calmly. When he ascended to an angel and traveled to the astral world, he had already learned about the secret of this pale queen from the Evernight goddess. The reason Sia Palenque Agers was able to advance to sequence 1 before the high priest of the Death Church was due to the Evernight goddess's secret assistance. A portion of the underworld's authority was the price she needed to pay. It was just that previously, she had been hesitant to demand it out of consideration for the god of combat's reaction. Now, naturally, there was no need for such concerns. Aaron finally looked at Elvin Gallo, arranging for this ancient bane, who had the door of rebirth sealed within him, to guard the abyss of ferrying. After sensing the location of his pseudo-god descent vessel, his figure quickly disappeared. The raging sea death ruins. The low, guttural sound, like a giant beast breathing, instantly vanished. The immediate silence made Klein, who was groping his way towards Azek, involuntarily stop. The strange changes within the mausoleum made it difficult for Klein, who had his eyes tightly closed and his spirituality restrained, to know what was happening for a moment, unclear whether it was for better or worse. Only able to hear his own heartbeat, Klein felt the passage of time was so long, as if an entire century had passed. Finally, he heard Aaron's familiar voice again. "This is the wraith that evolved after Hyder's demise, and the underworld authority stripped from the Pale Queen. It should be enough to repair Azek's damaged soul." Klein listened, bewildered, thoughts flashing through his mind but quickly replaced by confusion. He could only stand far away, unable even to observe. Aaron, who had crossed realms using the positioning of his divine descent avatar, withdrew his gaze from Azek, who was too weak to speak, and handed the 2 spoils of war to the Evernight goddess's divine descent vessel. For him, the wraith that Hader evolved had no use. If it could help Azek mend the wounds on his soul, it would be a profitable investment. Azek, with a complex gaze, looked at the beautiful hooded lady in front of him, the pale flames in his eyes flickering unsteadily. The feathered serpent, both illusory and real like a mountain, seemed to sense some unwelcome change. Its tail suddenly lashed out, wildly sweeping the surroundings. The enormous feathered snake, formed by the death uniqueness's activation, opened its gaping maw, revealing dark red flesh and yellowish greasy fangs. It spat out a black snake tongue and sickly green viscous fluid, attempting to devour Azek Eggers without hesitation. However, all of its attempts had no effect, as if it lived in another world. Aaron ignored the insane artificial death. As a cornerstone on the Evernight goddess's outer deity pathway, its fate was sealed the moment this, Mother of the Sky, appeared. This was also why Aaron directly made the decision for Azek. The undead formed from black mist uncontrollably fell into the Mother of the Sky's hand. Hyder's resentful face flashed by, but then became dull. All residual mental imprints were silently and completely erased, leaving only pure, chaotic high-level spirit bodies. In this peaceful and tranquil atmosphere, strange three-dimensional symbols condensed from a portion of the underworld's authority were pierced by countless black threads, and 2 faint points of light were dragged and peeled away. One flew towards Aaron, and the other flew towards Azek. For the first time, a clear female voice echoed in this tomb. "This portion of the underworld's authority can help you further perfect your divine kingdom. War is about to break out, you don't have much time." Divine Kingdom. Klein, who was fumbling his way forward not far away, couldn't help but stop. But what was even more absurd was that he even had the illusion that the latter half of the sentence seemed to be spoken to him as well. Feeling the tremor permeating the depths of his soul, Aaron's eyes shifted slightly, releasing the nascent divine kingdom that enveloped him, allowing the pulsating, sickly green light to merge. Strands of pale flames emerged from the depths of his golden pupils, and obscure, difficult to understand symbols appeared in his mind. Aaron seemed to sense something and looked at Azek, who was kneeling on the ground. The Mother of the Sky gripped the bird-shaped golden ornament tightly, then slowly pulled her arm back, directly tearing the ancient object from the crack in Azek's forehead. Azek, who had already guessed the identity of the newcomer, once again contorted his somewhat crestfallen expression, seemingly enduring unimaginable pain. In every drop of his blood, in every piece of his muscle, a small amount of spirit seeped out, intertwining to form a transparent soul body. This soul body appeared complete and without defect, yet it was full of contradictory disharmony, because half of it was golden yellow, from eyebrows and eyes to torso and limbs, possessing an ancient beauty. As the bird-shaped golden ornament was pulled out, Azek's translucent spirit began to split from the middle, inch by inch, as if someone was flaying his skin with a small knife. A non-human gurgling sound once again emanated from his throat, and Klein, the weakest among those present, felt his head dizzy and stinging, as if steel needles were wildly stirring in his brain. In just a few seconds, Azek's spirit body completely split into two halves. One half transformed into golden flowing light and entered the eyes of the bird-shaped ornament, while the other merged with the portion of the underworld's authority peeled off by the Evernight goddess. With the help of the spirit world's authority, which shared the same origin, Aaron stabilized Azek's collapsing underworld, integrating the pure spirit body origin left behind after Hyder's complete demise into Azek's torn and shattered spirit body. Almost instantly, the two pale flames in Azek's eyes extinguished, the white feathers and black scales that had grown on his body receded, and the distortion of his expression eased, no longer so ferocious. His face became slightly pale and transparent, and his forehead twitched in spasms. Even with the repair from an angel-level spirit body origin, the pain stemming from the depths of his spiritual body had not completely disappeared. The illusory world that had previously covered the tomb, with countless skeletons and phantoms, had been replaced by a deep, dark plain covered with slumber grass and night flowers. After taking control of the remaining underworld's authority, the Evernight goddess's control over this space, formed after death's demise, increased once again. The giant feathered snake, which had been struggling desperately, suddenly froze. The face identical to Azek's slowly melted away, restoring itself to the other half of the incomplete soul. The illusory black tubes that extended from the depths of the black mist were severed, and the original half of Azek's soul, which had been integrated with the uniqueness, was also peeled away. The giant feathered snake, like a mountain, slowly collapsed, as if transforming into a non-physical coffin made of dense black mist. The deep, dark plain covering the entire tomb trembled gently, and a figure wearing a layered, dark black long dress adorned with stars emerged. She gently beckoned. The coffin formed after the complete disintegration of the artificial death rapidly dematerialized, transforming into a deep black scythe, which appeared in the Evernight goddess's hand the next second. This scene, like a divine descent, was fleeting. After the deep, dark plain disappeared, Aaron finally looked at the calm-faced Mother of the Sky, and the half-bound soul beside her. I will take Azek back to the abyss of ferrying. The special nature of the origin of life and death in Hyder's spirit-body origin should be able to help him repair his soul. Beckoning the bird-shaped golden ornament suspended in midair, its pure black eyes, lacking vitality, glanced at Aaron, then passed over Azek to look at Klein, who was struggling to get up from the ground. A clear, cold voice, audible only to Aaron, quietly sounded. Badhale already knows that I have obtained the death uniqueness. During this time, I will fully attempt to initially accommodate it. After leaving here, set up a ritual. I will bestow a drop of water from the river of eternal darkness to make this mad half of Azek's soul fall into eternal slumber. You have also obtained a portion of the underworld's authority. You should know what to do with the rest. Aaron's expression remained unchanged. He nodded slightly, feeling a sense of urgency in his heart. For a considerable period of time to come, he would find it difficult to receive a response from the Evernight goddess. I need to help Azek fully recover as soon as possible. The Moon City High Priest Neum has already advanced to sequence 3 feet Horror Bishop, so he can advance to the adjacent pathways, Death Console. Thoughts arose in his mind one after another. Aaron bowed to the beautiful lady in the hooded cloak, then turned and, with the somewhat weak Azek, walked over to Klein. "It's over. Your eyes." Azek's low voice, tinged with fatigue and worry, sounded. Klein's body stiffened. He manipulated the puppet Ludwell, examining Mr. Azek for any signs of madness or loss of control, only then completely relaxing. He looked at the calm-faced Aaron with a strange gaze, then, after being glared at by the latter, awkwardly withdrew his gaze. Immediately, he boldly and curiously cast his eyes towards the depths of the tomb. Black mist permeated there, obscuring everything at the bottom, but the entire tomb world could still be clearly felt trembling gently. Closing his eyes and sensing the spirit world coordinates of the abyss of ferrying, the projection of the crown of stars reappeared. Aaron glanced at the curious Klein and added, "This place is about to completely disappear. Azek's soul injury has not been fully resolved yet. I will take you all away first." As Aaron's words fell, the entire black mist world trembled more violently, and Azek, whose aura was weak, immediately changed his expression, grabbing Klein, who was still confused. Amidst the strange sounds of the void cracking and decaying, a longsword covered in twilight light sliced through the boundless black mist, completely shattering this unique space formed by the Death's Fall. The terrifying aftershocks were dispelled by the surging darkness, but the aura of Twilight's arrival and the decay of all things were enough to make the wraiths and shadows swirling in the black mist world completely dissipate. The serene darkness, previously filled with moonflowers and night-scented grass, which had disappeared after collecting the Death's uniqueness, reappeared. However, unlike before, streaks of orange-red light shone into this nation. In the desolate twilight, a figure as large as a mountain vaguely emerged. Its limbs were abnormally long, and it wore silver armor full of a sense of decay. Its face was covered by a visor, revealing only a faint orange-red light. It held an exaggerated longsword in its hand, letting the tip hang naturally, touching the dark ground. God of Combat, Badhail. Aaron, who realized something was wrong even before Azek, cursed under his breath. High-level individuals of the warrior pathway could conceal their malice and certain actions, especially for the God of Combat standing at the pinnacle of the sequence. Before that sword strike was blocked by the Evernight goddess, Aaron didn't even feel a spiritual warning. Aaron restrained the instinct to mobilize the nation of disorder. At his current level, as long as he didn't actively expose himself, he wasn't worried about being seen through. He activated the Evernight mark to interfere with perception and unhesitatingly used the crown of stars to open the gate of banishment. The Evernight goddess needed to expend extra energy to suppress the Death's uniqueness, making it difficult for her to attend to other matters. Aaron had to leave this place of trouble before more gazes from the astral world fell upon it. Not daring to wander in the astral world, he relied on the gate of banishment to shuttle back and forth in the depths of the spirit world. After confirming it was safe, Aaron returned to the abyss of ferrying with Azek and Klein. The city of the undead, Manuel, which had previously collapsed and sunk into the river Styx, had been salvaged. Symbols, vastly different in style but equally profound and obscure, now covered every corner of the entire city. Sensing Aaron's return, Bernadette, who was using her own methods to repair the city of the undead, reformed her body in the void. After nodding to Azek, she frowned and asked Aaron, "Did a godly battle erupt in the astral world?" With the sage's particularity, even from within the abyss of ferrying, Bernadette vaguely foresaw the anomaly in the astral world. She didn't even need to scry to confirm it was related to Aaron's sudden departure earlier. The Evernight goddess has obtained the Death's uniqueness. Without much explanation, Aaron believed Bernadette knew what this meant. He then looked at the largely repaired city beneath his feet and said to Azek, who had a complex expression beside him, "The situation is urgent, so I made the decision for you. But now your soul is still incomplete. Currently, you are only maintaining your current state by consuming Hyder's soul origin." Azek massaged his brow, stopping Klein, who wanted to say something, and helped him remove the pollution caused by directly looking at the artificial death. He spoke calmly. I have grown accustomed to my current life, and this choice is also what I desired. Thank you for your help. The previous agreement is still valid, but I will need a period of sleep, of unknown duration, to recover. Waving his hand to interrupt Azek, Aaron no longer stood on ceremony. Leaving Klein in place, he led Azek and Bernadette to the gate of the underworld deep within the city of the undead, before continuing. Now that things have come to this, you both should be prepared for some things. In a year at most, or half a year at least, a turmoil no less than the War of the Four Emperors will sweep across the entire world. More than one person will ascend to godhood during this process, and similarly, gods will fall. This origin point of life and death, along with the authority of the underworld imprinted into your soul, can help you devour Hyder's soul origin to strengthen your fragmented soul. You should now know the river of eternal darkness. Its waters can put the other half of your soul, separated from the artificial death, into eternal sleep. You can use this to gradually devour and repair it with your current soul as the main body, without worrying about reverting to being the death console with only divinity. However, this must wait until the godly battle in the astral world ends. For now, you just need to stay here, repair your soul, and slowly wait. Unconsciously devouring the strange power seeping from the underworld gate, the stinging sensation from the depths of his soul lessened a bit. Azek was silent for a moment before slowly speaking. What do you need me to do? Slowly turning around, golden flames seemed to flicker deep within Aaron's eyes as he said with a playful tone. Completely reorganize the numinous episcopate and re-establish the Aegir's family. I don't think this will go against your will. If there's a pirate kingdom on the 5 seas, then the southern continent can certainly have a Barum kingdom. When the kings contend, the winner naturally takes all. Klein, who had been deliberately left behind, only felt Azek's aura moving away. Fortunately, the pollution had been removed. After successfully transferring the damage, flesh wriggled within his empty eye sockets, and the faint black mist that entered his vision made him pause. Just then, a voice sounded behind him. What is your relationship with His Excellency the Death Consul? Klein, who had been through so much recently, immediately tensed up. He turned sideways and retreated a step cautiously, manipulating his Beander puppet, Ludwell, to stand in front of him, looking in the direction of the voice. It was a handsome man in a black robe with crimson patterns. His bronze skin made Klein raise an eyebrow, especially when he noticed the other party's gaze, fixed directly on the Azek copper whistle on his chest. Seeing Klein's cautiousness, the black-robed man gave a self-deprecating smile. My name is Erodes Aegers. The great death consul is my grandfather. Another old monster who has lived for over 1,000 years. Klein silently complained in his heart. Feeling the rare warmth from the Azek copper whistle, he carefully responded. Compared to that lofty title, I prefer to call him Mr. Azek. He is my teacher. Nodding thoughtfully, just as he was about to ask about Azek's condition, Erodes Aegers' expression changed. He obediently closed his mouth and voluntarily retreated to the side. The thin black mist was torn apart, and amidst the flickering greenish deep fire, Elvin Gallo emerged from the spirit world with several others. He seemed to sense something, and his scarlet eyes subtly shifted, looking directly at Klein, who had tensed up again. Another angel. But why are these blood-red eyes so similar to Miss Messenger's? The pressure from the life form level made Klein's face twitch. He quickly suppressed the chaotic thoughts in his mind and bowed respectfully. He had already met several such prominent figures recently, who stood at the pinnacle of the real world, comparable only to popes, pontiffs, patriarchs, and some legendary ascetics in the major churches. He couldn't help but inwardly groan. Fortunately, the blood-eyed angel opposite him didn't make any other drastic moves. Coupled with the disappearance of his close acquaintances, Aaron and Azek, a very insecure Klein rationally chose to keep quiet. He used this interval to familiarize himself with his newly acquired marionette, Admiral of Hell, Ludwell. Through the marionette's perspective, Klein belatedly realized that his faceless disguise had been broken after directly facing the artificial death god in that black mist world and suffering mental pollution. At this moment, he had already reverted to his original appearance from Tingen City. His expression momentarily dazed, Klein silently lowered his head, lightly brushed his face, and once again transformed into the cold German sparrow. He didn't pay much attention to his previous unintentional action. If it had been Sherlock Moriarty who was exposed, he might have needed to worry if anyone had seen the Lowen wanted poster and thus suspected his identity. But a Nighthawk who had died long ago, and was even unknown, just like Welchen Naya who died because of the Antigonus family's notebook, no one would remember him except their relatives. With complex emotions, Klein's spirituality subtly stirred. He subconsciously looked in a certain direction, only to see a figure whose entire face was obscured by a hood standing behind the red-eyed angel. It wasn't until Klein averted his gaze that Dunn slowly raised his head. Within the profound gray eyes beneath his hood, indescribable emotions flickered. His lips trembled, and after a long while, he silently murmured to himself, "Klein Moretti." Klein, who had resumed his cross-legged sitting position, hadn't realized he had been exposed. He closed his eyes to sense the digestion of the marionettist potion, while also pondering the information he had heard in that black mist world. Just as his thoughts began to wander, Klein suddenly opened his eyes and rolled to the side. His original position was replaced by a dilapidated sailboat, predominantly dark and emitting a sickly green glow. Amidst the dull thud of a heavy object landing, the pale mainsail gently trembled, like a blooming, pitch-black tulip. Ludwell's flagship, the ghost ship, Black Tulip. Klein, who was nearly hit, twitched his face. He looked at Aaron, who was standing on the dilapidated deck, resisting the urge to roll his eyes, and asked with some concern, "Your Grace, how is Mr. Azek doing now?" Aaron glanced at Dunn, who was completely enveloped in a black robe not far away, and Klein, who seemed oblivious. He clicked his tongue and directly jumped off the dilapidated ghost ship, responding playfully, "I'm helping him repair his incomplete soul, but it will take some time." Before Klein could sigh in relief, Aaron's eyes slightly shifted. He pointed to the dilapidated ghost ship behind him, not intentionally lowering his voice, allowing both Klein and Dunn, who was not far away, to hear clearly. "I have already understood the full story of this incident. It can be confirmed that it was the evil spirit possessing Ince Zangwill who did this with the help of 008. Ludwell is already your marionette. You can control him to continue piloting this ghost ship, but the corresponding price will be to completely enter Ince Zangwill's sight. However, you can also use this to find his whereabouts." Evil spirit. Klein's expression changed, then, as if he thought of something, he coughed lightly and whispered, "Are you planning to give me this ghost ship?" As expected of the god of poverty. Aaron looked at Klein, somewhat speechless, and chuckled. "If you want it, I can give it to you." Seeing the half-smile expression, Klein awkwardly waved his hand. Although the ghost ship was precious, the gifts of fate always came with a hidden price. He had only been joking earlier and hadn't expected His Grace to agree so readily. Glancing at the now subdued Klein, Aaron thought for a moment and added, "Ince Zangwill's matter can be set aside for now. After causing such a big mess, he will lie low for a while. After leaving here, first take this ghost ship to the Sonia Sea. Frank will be waiting for you there. He wants to land on the Evernight Plains via the North Sea to find some experimental materials." Frank. Klein was stunned for a moment. The burly, mad biologist from the Chaos Council quickly came to mind. His face twitched slightly, and he vaguely guessed why the Star Admiral was unwilling to bring that guy to the Evernight Plains. Without giving Klein a chance to refuse, Aaron slightly raised his hand and directly threw him, along with the ghost ship behind him, out of the abyss of ferrying. He smiled lightly and gave a final reminder. "I left something in this ghost ship, but you must remember, to take revenge on a demigod who wields a grade 0 sealed artifact, the most important thing is your own level and strength. Otherwise, even with other means, you won't have the opportunity to use them." Elvin Gallo's figure silently appeared, his scarlet eyes looking at Klein's original position. As an ancient bane closely related to the spirit world, he vaguely sensed the specialness about Klein. It wasn't until he felt Aaron's gaze fall upon him that he retracted his gaze and spoke in a deep voice. These demigods sent by the artificial death god have already signed a contract with the Door of Rebirth, agreeing to abandon the darkness and serve us. Nodding with satisfaction, Aaron looked at the numinous episcopate demigods behind Elven Gallo, who were all injured to varying degrees and clearly forced into submission, and spoke with authority. Hater is dead, but the death consul of the fourth epoch has returned. I will support him in rebuilding the LotM kingdom in the southern continent. I believe this should also be what you desire to see. Presenting facts and evidence, using both carrots and sticks, even with the control of the Door of Rebirth, Aaron still intended to pacify these demigods who had experienced sudden great changes with a common goal. This was not only because war was imminent and required accumulating more demigod combat power to form an overwhelming advantage in local battlefields, but also because more Beyonders would be needed after the war ended. If he harvested these demigods, even if he obtained the corresponding Beyonder characteristics, he would not be able to cultivate Beyonders of the same level and experience in a short period. After all, both digesting potions and accumulating knowledge require sufficient time. Nodding towards Elven Gallo, and waiting for him to take these demigods away, Aaron then looked at Dun Smith, who had been silent all this time. The constantly fluctuating emotional colors on his spirit body were enough to show the turmoil within the former Nighthawk. The thin, hazy black mist continuously converged towards the deepest part of the abyss of the ferryman, and countless spirits and undead surged instinctively towards the dilapidated city of the undead, Manuel. The bone-chilling wind blew open his hood, and Dunsmith met Aaron's gaze with a complex expression. His deep gray eyes held a hint of loss, but his voice was extremely firm as he whispered, "That's Klein." Aaron nodded noncommittally, looking at the city of the undead below, which was filled with endless undying creatures and had regained its vitality. He chuckled and casually replied, "Aren't you also resurrected from the dead? However, he is indeed different from you. After dealing with Ince Zangwill, you can return to the Evernight Church as a hero and take over the Archbishop's seat. As for him, he can't go back." Hey, that's true in every sense of the word. Without much explanation, Aaron waved his hand to stop Dunn, who was about to ask more questions, and led him back to the deepest part of Manuel. Eamon sat cross-legged in front of the huge door to the underworld, using the portion of the underworld authority granted by the Evernight goddess to connect with the underworld beyond the door, drawing on Hyder's spiritual origin to repair and strengthen his soul. Sensing Aaron's aura, Eamon suddenly opened his eyes, directly ignoring Dunn beside Aaron. Even if they didn't know before, 008 and that evil spirit must now know about Klein's peculiarity. Your idea is too risky, not to mention that, blasphemer. Aaron didn't mind Amon's questioning tone. He even nodded, acknowledging his statement, but then added, "Constant evasion and tolerance will only cultivate hothouse flowers. How can they face Eamon? The apocalypse is coming. Neither the chess players nor the chess pieces have much time left." Using himself as bait and letting him personally direct a grand play is also the optimal solution for his demigod ritual. As for your worries, well, the Black and Yellow King who controls good luck will never lack luck. Eamon immediately fell silent, either persuaded by Aaron or realizing that he was currently powerless to change Aaron's mind. Pointing to Dunn, who was frowning and pondering behind him, Aaron smiled and introduced, "You should still remember this one. He was the captain of the Tingen City Beyonder team and died trying to save Klein. He has already completed half of the Undying's ritual. The rest is up to you. Once he advances to demigod, I will have him seek out Klein." Amon's expression softened considerably. After a moment of contemplation, a pale light suddenly surged from within him, instantly merging into the somewhat stunned Dunn. A gentle voice followed, "Don't worry, this is just a Beyonder characteristic of an Undying. I cannot leave here to help Klein for now, so I can only do my best to help you advance." Even though his angelic status and strength had not fully recovered due to soul damage, Eamon, with his extremely high essence, did not need to expel Beyonder characteristics by having children. Moreover, expelling the excess Beander characteristics would actually lighten his burden and accelerate the recovery process. After entrusting Dun to Aemon, Eren glanced at the closed door to the underworld, seemingly meeting the gaze of an existence behind the door. The next second, Eren's expression subtly changed. A dense dark golden mist surged from the depths of his pupils, and he instinctively looked up, directly gazing at the astral world constructed by various authorities. This minor divine war had ended. Sonia Sea, a small island outside the Gorgas archipelago. Unlike Nas, the White City, and capital of the Gorgas archipelago, this place was at the very edge of the safe shipping lanes, extremely close to the almost illusory dangerous sea in the easternmost part of the Sonia Sea. Even the bravest whaling ships would not venture here rashly. And at this moment, a huge sailing ship was docked on the eastern side of this secluded, isolated island. The fluttering flag depicted 10 white stars of the same size, and these stars encircled a cold, lashless eye. The flagship of the star's pirate crew, the Future. The dim sunset streamed through the window into the captain's cabin. Admiral of the stars Katlia sat cross-legged, the different symbolic patterns and magical markings on her black classical robe shimmering with faint light. Katlia's black hair was simply draped, and her purple eyes were drawn inward, seemingly transforming into an abyss that could devour souls. Her inherent mysterious aura became even more pronounced, and before her lay a drop of silver blood sealed in a transparent crystal. Fine beads of sweat seeped from her forehead, and Katlia's body trembled slightly. She suddenly closed her eyes, almost collapsing. After a long while, Katlia, whose spirituality was almost exhausted, stood up somewhat weakly. She grabbed the transparent crystal that was quietly suspended in midair, and unconcealed joy gleamed in the depths of her eyes. Advancing to Sequence 4, Mysticologist required fully analyzing a drop of mythical creature blood to obtain complex and vast knowledge from it, and this would be a lengthy process. Ever since receiving the Queen Mystic's bestowal and obtaining this drop of a fate pathway angel's blood, Katlia had been continuously using her Eye of Keeping to analyze the blood of the Serpent of Fate. Now she was confident that she could complete the advancement ritual in at most half a month, or even just a week. Taking a deep breath to calm her somewhat excited mood, Katlia, feeling good, put away the mythical creature's blood again and casually undid the spiritual wall of the captain's cabin. "Frank, stop right there, I'm going to skin you alive." With the dissipation of the spiritual wall, noisy quarreling instantly replaced the original quietness of the captain's cabin, and an indescribable stench wafted from the deck. Katlia's face twitched several times. Her brain, already stinging from spiritual exhaustion, immediately felt waves of dizziness. Forcibly enduring her physical discomfort, she quickly left the captain's cabin and immediately saw Frank being chased all over by the quartermaster Nina. The source of the stench permeating the future was the opened wolf fishkin in Frank's hand. Her fists involuntarily clenched. Katlia took a deep breath, just about to scold Frank, but was choked by the pungent smell again, almost making her lose control. Fortunately, the sharp-eyed Frank noticed Katlia's grim expression. He scratched his head and laughed heartily. "Captain, you're out of seclusion. Perfect, do you want to try my newly researched Beander wolf fish can? This thing can." His hearty laughter abruptly stopped. The burly Frank, who looked like a giant bear, had disappeared from his spot. The expressionless Katlia appeared on the deck, slowly lowering her raised leg. The crew members around, who had been pinching their noses and watching the show, immediately quieted down. In the center of the somewhat desolate isolated island, Frank unconcernedly rose from the ground, brushed off the fallen leaves, wiped the mud stained with his secret recipe wolf fish into his mouth, chewed carefully for a while, and muttered to himself in a low voice. "Alas, such a delicious treat, and it can even accelerate spiritual recovery, yet the captain doesn't know how to appreciate it." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly had an inspiration and his gaze turned to the shadow under the bushes to the side. There, Darn SS twisted, and a figure emerged, a tall and pale figure. It was the first mate of the Future, bloodless, Heath Doyle. His cheek skin was almost transparent, His nose bridge was disproportionately high, and his whole person had a sickly feeling. He carefully placed a pile of bottles and jars on the ground, then quickly moved away, as if what was inside was something extremely dangerous. Frank was already accustomed to this and, with great enthusiasm, picked up a wolf fish that had spilled onto the ground and handed it over with great anticipation. "Heath, come and try my latest cultivated and improved wolf fish. I want to see what reaction the Rose Bishop will have after eating it." Quietly retreating a few more steps, Heath Doyle coughed lightly and, with a hoarse voice, changed the subject. "The captain approved the vacation you requested last week, but she doesn't want to see you on the future for a while." Saying this, the Rose Bishop pointed to the pile of bottles and jars on the ground and added, "That also includes your strange things. As for the mud in your room, I'll have someone move it to this island later." Frank was stunned for a moment, and after Heath mercilessly refused him again, he stuffed the last wolf fish into his mouth, mumbling indistinctly, "I'm not leaving the Star Sea Pirates. I just want to take advantage of this vacation to go see the depths of the North Sea or the ice and snow world of the polar regions. Perhaps ancient microorganisms from the Fourth Epoch, Third Epoch, or even Second Epoch and First Epoch are buried under the thick ice there. This could allow me to gain so much." Frank paused, looked at the vanished Heath Doyle, sighed somewhat melancholically, took out a gold coin from his pregnant, and began to set up the ritual to summon the ghost ship, as Aaron had previously instructed. With the infusion of spirituality, no trace of a ghost ship appeared in the expanding candlelight. Instead, a headless lady carrying 4 heads walked out. Frank was startled at first, then gazed fervently at Rynette Tinichair's 4 beautiful, golden-haired, red-eyed heads, almost subconsciously murmuring, "How did you manage to make them perfectly identical? If planted in the soil, can more grow?" The eyes of the 4 heads Rynette Tinichair was carrying in her hands rotated individually, finally all fixing on Frank's face. Frank, who had already digested the druid potion and was only 1 step away from advancing to a demigod, floated up without any resistance, his expression bewildered as he tumbled in midair and plunged headfirst into the deep pit he had dug himself. Frank's legs struggled outside, but he couldn't pull himself out for a while. Pretending he heard nothing, Heath Doyle, who had collapsed into a shadow and swiftly returned to the future, heard the complaints of Quartermaster Nina. "Captain, isn't it too dangerous to just let that fellow Frank go?" Waving her hand to soothe the somewhat worried Nina, Catlia, whose spirituality had mostly recovered, merely sighed and did not explain further. Through Her Majesty the Queen's letter, she had also learned some secret information, enough to glimpse a corner of the terrifying hidden force behind Frank. Even if Frank really ran into trouble, a great figure would step in to resolve it. Suddenly, Catlia seemed to sense something, and her deep purple eyes instinctively looked towards the isolated island where Frank was, vaguely seeing a crudely made illusory doll. This doll had no head. The image flashed by, and Catlia's eyes instantly closed. There was a burning pain inside, and 2 lines of tears flowed uncontrollably. She frowned little by little, murmuring uncertainly, "Ancient Bane." In the richly colored, vividly overlapping spirit world, the black tulip moved aimlessly, avoiding dangerous areas. Klein walked out of the captain's cabin, frowning and sighing, while Admiral of Hell, Ludwell, wearing a silver-white mask, honestly followed beside him. Since leaving the abyss of ferrying, he had been searching for the backup plan Aaron had placed on this ghost ship, but unfortunately, even going to that mysterious gray fog space for divination, he lacked key information and had no specific direction. As he was pondering if there were other methods he could try, Klein saw Rynette Tinichair walk out of the void. This Miss Messenger, whom he hadn't seen for a long time, was wearing a complex black dress similar to her usual attire, with one of her heads biting a gold coin. This should be Frank's summons, Klein immediately understood, as now, besides Mr. Azek and Aaron, the only one who knew his messenger contact information was this mad biologist. And through the messenger as a medium, Klein could reverse locate Frank's exact position and arrive directly by traversing the spirit world with this ghost ship. Expressing his gratitude to Miss Messenger, Klein immediately asked, "Can you take me to the person who just summoned you?" He was very polite to his powerful and mysterious Miss Messenger, especially now that Mr. Azek was not present. The four heads nodded in perfect synchronization, and their bright red lips parted slightly. Yes, if he's still alive. Klein was startled and was about to ask for clarification when he saw Rynette Tinacher's last head, which hadn't had time to speak, open its mouth. Golden long hair, like spreading threads, enveloped the black tulip, and the next second, this ghost ship disappeared from its original location. Sonia Sea, somewhere in the center of an isolated island outside the Gargath archipelago. Katlia frowned, looking at Frank, who was stuck headfirst in the mud and couldn't break free no matter how much he struggled, and asked sternly. "What did you just do?" A druid can draw nutrients and oxygen from the soil, so even if he's stuck headfirst in the mud, there's no danger to his life. Katlia wasn't worried about Frank, she was just curious about what had happened. "I just consulted that strange spirit world creature on how to achieve such perfect technique." A muffled voice came through the solid mud. The druid's proud earth-based spells seemed to lose their effect at this moment. After Frank symbolically tried a few more times, he gave up struggling, on the verge of tears. Number 448 Chapter 423, Dangerous New Crew. AI Model, Gemini 2.5 Flash. Watching Frank, who had finally settled down, Katlia's mouth twitched, guessing that this was likely a punishment from that high-level spirit world creature. Since he won't die, he should learn his lesson. Thinking this, her expression suddenly changed, and she turned her head to look at the sea to the left of the future. Ripples spread across the void above the sea, and a gloomy green light overflowed. Amidst the wraiths, shadowy figures, and various strange spirit world creatures, a sailboat, roughly the same size as the future, abruptly appeared. Seeing the very prominent black tulip on the sail, Katlia's face had just shown a hint of vigilance when, in the next second, her body instantly tensed. She suppressed the instinct to use her eye of peeping, and lowered her eyes to look behind her. Without a sound, Rynette Tinacher appeared beside Frank, who was stuck in the ground, bringing Klein and I with her. After confirming that this fellow was not in any mortal danger, Klein breathed a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands at Miss Messenger, and after she returned to the spirit world, he looked at the woman in the warlock's robe and calmly introduced himself. "Gehrman Sparrow. Frank should have told you about my matter beforehand. I will be taking him away for a period of time." As he spoke, Klein pointed at Frank, who had finally crawled out of the dirt, but his gaze subtly drifted towards the astrolabe hanging from Katlia's waist. Unlike his distant observation at the pirate gathering before, Klein, who had already advanced to marionettist, could confirm that this item was related to that mysterious gray fog space. Not noticing Klein's subtle scrutiny, Katlia's eyes flickered, drawn by Rynette Tinacher and the marionette Ized Ludwig. She looked at Klein with a touch of pity, sighed, and after some thought, still reminded him. "I wish you a pleasant journey. Also, be careful of Frank." Feeling the complex emotions contained in that gaze, Klein's eyelids twitched slightly. He nodded silently, and after the Admiral of Stars transformed into starlight and vanished, he looked at Frank, who was constantly digging dirt out of his ears. "Let's go. We can set off now." Frank was stunned for a moment, and a bright smile quickly appeared on his face. He slapped his head as if he had thought of something. But before he could shout, a ball of faint blue starlight flew out from the future. In the next second, the flagship of the Star Pirates surged with even more brilliant starlight, disappearing directly from this sea area as if avoiding a plague god. "What did you do to them?" Klein suppressed the words that came to his lips, looking at the somewhat bewildered Frank and the object wrapped in the starlight thrown out by the future, a pile of colorful dirt. Realizing that he had been abandoned, Frank, somewhat dejectedly, pulled out an unstruggling silver-scaled fish from the silver soil. He took a deep breath. Then, as if he had thought of something, Frank slapped his head and pulled another silver-scaled fish from the dirt, promoting it to Klein with great enthusiasm. "This is the improved silver-scaled fish I cultivated after my advancement, with red wine as blood. Although it's still a semi-finished product with a very short lifespan, it can already reproduce in my specially prepared soil. Praise the earth's grace. This will absolutely not be inferior to Sunia blood wine, and you won't get drunk at all. You devil, Klein took a deep breath, not wanting to bother with Frank, who was drowning his sorrows in alcohol, or more accurately, in fish. He turned directly and walked towards the black tulip. After a few steps, Klein stopped, turned his head, and glared at Frank, emphasizing each word very seriously. On my ship, you are not allowed to attempt these terrifying experiments again, if you still want me to take you to the Evernight Plains. Frank put down the shriveled silver-scaled fish in his hand, scratched his head somewhat blankly, and looked at Klein in confusion. But Lord Blessed told me before that this ship was lent to us for use, and he even praised my experiments as great feats capable of changing the world, and allowed me to continue experimenting on this ghost ship. Klein's face instantly fell, feeling a bit embarrassed. Suppressing the shame, he nodded calmly and returned to the ghost ship with Ludwig. Standing on the deck and watching Frank busy transporting things, Klein was very worried about what experiments this guy, who was not much better than a lunatic, could complete, and what strange species he might create. What if he planted himself and harvested a pile of Franks? Then this world would truly be in danger. Klein silently exhaled, deeply feeling the difficulty of this journey. Not only did he have to guard against Ince Zangwill, who was hiding in the dark, but he also had to worry about when Frank would give him a surprise. Abyss of ferrying. Aaron sat cross-legged on the top of the inverted mausoleum at the very center of the City of the Dead, Manuel, and began to arrange the ritual he had prayed for from the Evernight goddess. Thick black mist, imbued with death's aura, was pulled by an invisible force, forming an illusory door covered with strange symbols under the flickering candlelight. A figure drifted out from the deep, seemingly boundless darkness. It was Azek's soul, with his eyes tightly closed and a serene expression. Receiving this half of Azek's soul, which had been stripped from the death uniqueness, washed by the river of eternal darkness, and fallen into eternal slumber, Aaron heard an ethereal, distant female voice in his ear. Unless you encounter a life-threatening situation, I will not intervene for a while. Also, do not contact the Earth Mother Church recently. Is it because of the previous divine war? Aaron raised his eyebrows, then nodded indifferently. Watching the illusory door dissipate, his figure flickered, and he arrived before the door to the underworld at the very bottom of the Styx. Hyder's spiritual origin had been completely absorbed by Azek. The Death Consul's soul repair speed was much faster than Aaron had anticipated. As if sensing Aaron's arrival, or perhaps sensing the half of the soul of the same origin in Aaron's hand, Azek, who was sitting cross-legged before the door to the underworld, absorbing the boundless black mist, suddenly opened his eyes. A complex flicker passed through his already pale vertical pupils. Without needing Aaron to say anything more, Azek waved his hand, sending the somewhat bewildered Dunsmith out of the Styx. His body suddenly swelled, directly activating his mythical creature form, transforming into a massive, hundreds of meters long feathered serpent, and swallowed himself, with closed eyes in one gulp. Endless information, invisible to the naked eye, seeped out from the void, condensing into Bernadette's figure beside Aaron. The Queen Mystic gazed at the massive feathered serpent stirring the Styx, and the Wheel of Fortune card and the Hermit card quietly appeared in her hand. As a sage, only one step away from the Knowledge Emperor, Bernadette, with the help of these two blasphemy slates intentionally left behind by Roussel, could, to a certain extent, imbue abstract knowledge with substantial power. Watching Frank, who had finally settled down, Catlia's mouth twitched, guessing that this was likely a punishment from that high-level spirit world creature. Since he won't die, he should learn his lesson. Thinking this, her expression suddenly changed, and she turned her head to look at the sea to the left of the future. Ripples spread across the void above the sea, and a gloomy green light overflowed. Amidst the wraiths, shadowy figures, and various strange spirit world creatures, a sailboat, roughly the same size as the future, abruptly appeared. Seeing the very prominent black tulip on the sail, Catlia's face had just shown a hint of vigilance when, in the next second, her body instantly tensed. She suppressed the instinct to use her eye of peeping, and lowered her eyes to look behind her. Without a sound, Reinette Tinaker appeared beside Frank, who was stuck in the ground, bringing Klein and I with her. After confirming that this fellow was not in any mortal danger, Klein breathed a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands at Miss Messenger, and after she returned to the spirit world, he looked at the woman in the warlock's robe and calmly introduced himself. Gehrman Sparrow. Frank should have told you about my matter beforehand. I will be taking him away for a period of time. As he spoke, Klein pointed at Frank, who had finally crawled out of the dirt, but his gaze subtly drifted towards the astrolabe hanging from Katlia's waist. Unlike his distant observation at the pirate gathering before, Klein, who had already advanced to marionettist, could confirm that this item was related to that mysterious gray fog space. Not noticing Klein's subtle scrutiny, Katlia's eyes flickered, drawn by Reinette Tinaker and the marionette Ized Ludwig. She looked at Klein with a touch of pity, sighed, and after some thought, still reminded him. I wish you a pleasant journey. Also, be careful of Frank. Feeling the complex emotions contained in that gaze, Klein's eyelids twitched slightly. He nodded silently, and after the Admiral of Stars transformed into starlight and vanished, he looked at Frank, who was constantly digging dirt out of his ears. Let's go. We can set off now. Frank was stunned for a moment, and a bright smile quickly appeared on his face. He slapped his head as if he had thought of something. But before he could shout, a ball of faint blue starlight flew out from the future. In the next second, the flagship of the Star Pirates surged with even more brilliant starlight, disappearing directly from this sea area as if avoiding a plague god. What did you do to them? Klein suppressed the words that came to his lips, looking at the somewhat bewildered Frank and the object wrapped in the starlight thrown out by the future, a pile of colorful dirt. Realizing that he had been abandoned, Frank, somewhat dejectedly, pulled out an unstruggling silver-scaled fish from the silver soil. He took a deep breath. Then, as if he had thought of something, Frank slapped his head and pulled another silver-scaled fish from the dirt, promoting it to Klein with great enthusiasm. This is the improved silver-scaled fish I cultivated after my advancement, with red wine as blood. Although it's still a semi-finished product with a very short lifespan, it can already reproduce in my specially prepared soil. Praise the Earth's grace. This will absolutely not be inferior to Sunia blood wine, and you won't get drunk at all. You devil. Klein took a deep breath, not wanting to bother with Frank, who was drowning his sorrows in alcohol, or more accurately, in fish. He turned directly and walked towards the black tulip. After a few steps, Klein stopped, turned his head, and glared at Frank, emphasizing each word very seriously. On my ship, you are not allowed to attempt these terrifying experiments again, if you still want me to take you to the Evernight Plains. Frank put down the shriveled silver-scaled fish in his hand, scratched his head somewhat blankly, and looked at Klein in confusion. But Lord Blessed told me before that this ship was lent to us for use, and he even praised my experiments as great feats capable of changing the world, and allowed me to continue experimenting on this ghost ship. Klein's face instantly fell, feeling a bit embarrassed. Suppressing the shame, he nodded calmly and returned to the ghost ship with Ludwig. Standing on the deck and watching Frank busy transporting things, Klein was very worried about what experiments this guy, who was not much better than a lunatic, could complete, and what strange species he might create. What if he planted himself and harvested a pile of Franks? Then this world would truly be in danger. Klein silently exhaled, deeply feeling the difficulty of this journey. Not only did he have to guard against Ince Zangwill, who was hiding in the dark, but he also had to worry about when Frank would give him a surprise. Abyss of ferrying. Aaron sat cross-legged on the top of the inverted mausoleum at the very center of the City of the Dead, Manuel, and began to arrange the ritual he had prayed for from the Evernight goddess. Thick black mist, imbued with death's aura, was pulled by an invisible force, forming an illusory door covered with strange symbols under the flickering candlelight. A figure drifted out from the deep, seemingly boundless darkness. It was Azek's soul, with his eyes tightly closed and a serene expression. Receiving this half of Azek's soul, which had been stripped from the death uniqueness, washed by the river of eternal darkness, and fallen into eternal slumber, Aaron heard an ethereal, distant female voice in his ear. Unless you encounter a life-threatening situation, I will not intervene for a while. Also, do not contact the Earth Mother Church recently. Is it because of the previous divine war? Aaron raised his eyebrows, then nodded indifferently. Watching the illusory door dissipate, his figure flickered, and he arrived before the door to the underworld at the very bottom of the Styx. Hyder's spiritual origin had been completely absorbed by Azek. The Death Console's soul repair speed was much faster than Aaron had anticipated. As if sensing Aaron's arrival, or perhaps sensing the half of the soul of the same origin in Aaron's hand, Azek, who was sitting cross-legged before the door to the underworld, absorbing the boundless black mist, suddenly opened his eyes. A complex flicker passed through his already pale vertical pupils. Without needing Aaron to say anything more, Azek waved his hand, sending the somewhat bewildered Dunsmith out of the Styx. His body suddenly swelled, directly activating his mythical creature form, transforming into a massive, hundreds of meters long feathered serpent, and swallowed himself, with closed eyes in one gulp. Endless information, invisible to the naked eye, seeped out from the void, condensing into Bernadette's figure beside Aaron. The Queen Mystic gazed at the massive feathered serpent stirring the Styx, and the Wheel of Fortune card and the Hermit card quietly appeared in her hand. As a sage, only one step away from the Knowledge Emperor, Bernadette, with the help of these two blasphemy slates intentionally left behind by Roussel, could, to a certain extent, imbue abstract knowledge with substantial power. Bernadette, who controlled a portion of the authority of fate in the Wheel of Fortune card, only needed specific mediums to unleash certain special abilities of high-level beyonders from the fate pathway. Even if Azek's soul fusion went awry, he could use a weakened fate reset to buy time for rescue. Hopefully, it won't be necessary. Aaron's thoughts stirred slightly, connecting to the Nation of Disorder. He took out the blood of the Snake of Fate, which he had specifically obtained from a baby in Backland some time ago, and threw it to Bernadette. As soon as it left Aaron's control, this drop of silver blood immediately expanded, turning into a ball of light. One mercury-colored, complex symbol after another leapt out from it, instantly forming a giant, illusory, scaleless snake. On the surface of this silver-white giant snake, abstract and distorted patterns and symbols formed interconnected rotating wheels, with different markings around each wheel. The Wheel of Fortune card quietly disappeared. Bernadette, with silver eyes, transformed into a torrent of information and merged into that illusory, scaleless snake, completely enveloping the massive feathered snake, burning with pale flames, that Azek had transformed into. Observing the state of the two angels with interest, and with the blessing of the Nation of Disorder, Aaron gained a deeper understanding of the mysteries of the complete mythical creature forms of the Death Pathway and the Hermit Pathway. He began to accelerate Azek's return using his authority as a balancer. A deep, subdued dark gold radiance, not dazzling but profound, instantly enveloped the hundreds of miles of the ferrying abyss. A miniature world rose behind Aaron, and the portion of the underworld's authority that had originally merged into his nascent divine kingdom was finally completely assimilated at this moment. The entire nascent divine kingdom began to tremble slightly. Law and order intertwined, forming a unique underworld at the very bottom of that miniature world. Reality and the underworld opposed each other, life and death complemented each other, and order was balanced. The nascent divine kingdom, already extremely complete from absorbing fragments of the Night Emperor's divine kingdom, began to undergo further transformation, making the entire divine kingdom even more real. The vast illusory world instantly enveloped the two angels who had displayed their complete mythical creature forms, but it stopped at the last moment before completely solidifying. Aaron's figure reformed. This feeling of being one step away from perfection left him with a lump in his throat, but he had no intention of forcibly taking that final step. Under normal circumstances, a Sequence 2 balancer would continuously elevate their domain of judgment as the potion was digested, only truly acquiring a nascent divine kingdom upon complete digestion of the potion. This was also the foundation for advancing to Sequence 1 Hand of Order. Even if an ordinary balancer fully digests the potion and obtains a nascent divine kingdom, it's only the illusion of a city. I, however, have perfectly inherited the Night Emperor's legacy through the unique nature of the Nation of Disorder, which is why I have such a foundation now. Allowing one's nascent divine kingdom to completely merge with the corresponding real-world area is something that only needs to be done when advancing to Sequence 1. It's more like a breakthrough point for embedding one's order into the world's underlying rules, and also an anchor for stabilizing oneself. As his nascent divine kingdom further improved and sublimated, Aaron's eyes grew brighter. Recalling the information he had gained when deciphering the Justiciar card, he pondered for a moment, then suddenly raised his hand and clenched it tightly. In the nascent divine kingdom, the underworld, deposited beneath that illusory world trembled violently. Dark gold chains of order shattered, turning into swirling mist, and sank along with this illusory underworld, merging into the entire ferrying abyss. Aaron's aura weakened for a moment, but quickly returned to normal. He closed his eyes and sensed for a moment, a smile appearing on his face. The entire ferrying abyss was now completely under his control. His divine kingdom far surpassed angels of the same level. While this meant greater power, even without relying on the Nation of Disorder, he possessed a natural suppression against other balancers. However, the pressure he would face during advancement would also increase exponentially. A single city merging with reality would likely be unable to bear the pressure of the entire divine kingdom. He had to find points of convergence with reality, and the ferrying abyss was one of them. East Tark County, Pass River Valley, 5 Seas, Moon City. Aaron's gaze swept over the illusory world beneath his feet, which had been stripped of the underworld. His eyes lingered for a moment on the latter two locations, then he subtly retracted his divine kingdom. After confirming Azek's condition, Aaron did not continue to wait. This place had already been assimilated by his divine kingdom, and if any abnormality in order occurred, he could instantly return no matter where he was. In the spirit world, a vibrant, abstract painting-like realm, the slightly dilapidated black tulip slowly moved through the colorful blocks. On the deck outside the captain's cabin, Admiral of Hell, Ludwell skillfully raised his right arm. His arm quickly became illusory, with faint greenish lights appearing, as if it had turned into a wraith or a ghost. Suddenly, his right arm shot out, and an illusory face emerged from his pale palm. A tongue covered in pale feathers extended into the colorful blocks, dragging back a few strangely shaped spirit world creatures. Putting Azek's copper whistle back into the cigarette case sealed with a wall of spirituality, Klein, with Alger's face, glanced at the spirit world creatures caught by Ludwell, and reluctantly shouted towards the depths of the cabin. "Frank, I caught what you wanted." The next second, accompanied by the vibration of the deck, Frank's burly figure appeared. He greeted Klein very enthusiastically, his eyes shining as he looked at the uniquely shaped spirit world creatures. "Praise the Mother Goddess. With these experimental materials, I will surely create something even greater." Klein's eyelids twitched. He reached out to stop Frank, who was excited and even eager to try, and lightly coughed, saying indifferently, "According to the agreement we made when you boarded, the cabins of this ghost ship can be used for your creations, but as a supervisor, I need to understand your experimental progress and—" Klein paused, holding back the words, "dangerous, evil," that came to his lips, and chose a more subtle expression. Your wild ideas." Frank was stunned for a moment, then scratched his head a little sheepishly, laughing heartily. "Sorry, Mr. Gehrman Sparrow, I was a bit too excited just now and forgot to explain my ideas to you. The bounty of the land brings us the joy of harvest, but land is finite, and if disturbed by war, the bounty of the land might be squandered. Therefore, I plan to thoroughly research spirit world creatures. The specific approach is still to be determined, but I plan to first try to crossbreed them with wheat." Frank became more and more excited as he spoke, completely oblivious to Klein's suddenly stiff expression. "This is a field I have never explored before, and I might need your marionette to help me a bit. If successful, this will be a great creation." As early as his advancement to marionettist and receiving the blessings of the 7 lights of the spirit world, Klein had already learned from Azek that the gray fog space was Saphira Castle, one of the Saphira that even deities coveted. Although he wasn't sure how he inexplicably became the owner of Saphira Castle, and the great ruler above the spirit world mentioned by Rhodes should refer to the original owner of that gray fog space, Klein still felt he couldn't just let Frank wreak havoc in the spirit world. The thought of a harvest scene filled with wheat ears and mushrooms appearing in the spirit world made Klein instinctively pinch the space between his eyebrows, and he asked in a deep voice, "What do you need my marionette for?" Frank had already captured the poor spirit world creatures and put them into a brown container stained with dirt. Hearing Klein's question, he pointed at the marionette Ludwell, who was standing still, and laughed heartily. "We can't stay in one area of the spirit world forever to try out my ideas, but we can use the underworld within Ludwell's body. That can provide a stable environment similar to the spirit world, and it also makes it convenient for me to observe the progress of the experiment." Klein pondered for a moment and did not refuse. After all, compared to letting Frank mess around directly in the spirit world, the risk of sacrificing Ludwell was clearly more controllable. Marionettes had no human rights anyway, and if anything truly went wrong, he could handle it urgently. Rejecting Frank's enthusiastic invitation to visit the cabin together, Klein returned to the captain's cabin with Ludwell, took out paper and pen, and was just pondering how to write a letter to Mr. Azek when he suddenly frowned. A strange sense of unease spread. This was the clown's spiritual warning. "Ins Zangwill." Klein's eyes instantly sharpened. Without any hesitation, he activated creeping hunger. The flesh in his palm split open, and the deep light of Rusko's eye flashed, followed by the appearance of the scepter of the sea god, emitting a tyrannical aura. Looking at the source of the spiritual warning, Klein, who was full of vigilance, froze for a moment, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. A ball of silver-white light passed through the dense, vivid overlapping colors, rushing directly towards the black tulip, followed by a chom-blue sailboat several times larger than the black tulip. The flagship of that, King of Dawn. Klein subtly frowned. Unsure of what was happening, he was about to control the ghost ship to move away, but the scepter of the sea god in his hand suddenly went out of control. At the tip of the bone scepter, the gems suddenly emitted dazzling light, either cyan blue or silver white. Under Klein's somewhat bewildered gaze, one after one by one of magnificent silver-white lightning bolts suddenly fell from the sky. These lightning bolts spread out like tentacles, engulfing the surrounding several hundred meters of the spirit world in a thunder forest, with the aura of destruction and the feeling of devastation being almost tangible. The ball of silver-white light, enveloped by the lightning storm, finally stopped its forward momentum, revealing a giant figure completely covered in silver-white armor. Thick silver-white beams of light densely struck the armor, leaving marks of varying depth, but they recovered in an instant. Even if it couldn't cause real damage, the silver-white lightning beams could always catch up with the armored giant who wanted to escape as quickly as possible, and even preemptively block him, crushing his plan to leave the storm-stricken area. Intense rumbling echoed. Frank, who was confused, poked his head out of the cabin, found a tall, beautiful figure had appeared in the cabin, and the next second, a tingling sensation spread throughout his body, dragging his consciousness into darkness. "You've advanced another sequence in such a short time, you truly surprise me." Listening to the somewhat familiar voice, Klein's expression was a little stiff. He had already guessed that the tall elf in front of him was the mysterious expert who had returned the scepter of the sea god to him at the end of the pirate gathering. Confirming that Frank was only unconscious, Klein's Adam's apple bobbed. He bowed and respectfully replied, "My advancement was merely due to luck. May I ask how I should address you, senior?" Playing with the bone scepter that lay obediently in her palm, Shattaz glanced at the approaching dawn, which was not far away, and a playful smile appeared on her lips as she said, "Queen of Elves, Goslineham." "Hey, you should have heard my name." Klein's eyes widened abruptly, feeling absurd, but remembering the murals he had seen in the underwater ruins at the time, and seeing how docile the scepter of the sea god, with its extremely negative side effects, was at this moment, he fell silent. Just then, the pursuing dawn stopped outside the lightning storm. A colossal figure, also clad in silver full-body armor, leapt out and charged towards the figure in the middle of the lightning storm. "We are responsible for pursuing an archbishop of the Fesic god of combat church. He himself is only a sequence 4 demon hunter, but he wields a sealed artifact with living characteristics, corresponding to a sequence 3 silver knight. That's how he escaped the previous ambush." Shadows chuckled and explained to the somewhat surprised Klein, then gently stroked the scepter of the sea god, making the gems even more dazzling. "This sealed artifact has already been infused with power by me in advance. You only need to pour in your spirituality to activate it, and it will be roughly equivalent to a full power strike from a sequence 4 demigod." Before Klein could ask further, the Queen of Elves paused, and the corners of her mouth curved playfully as she said, "Also, the sea area near Sonia Island has been put under martial law, and reinforcements from the God of Combat Church and the Fesic royal family should be arriving soon. If I were you, I wouldn't continue to foolishly stay here." Quickly realizing the seriousness of the problem, Klein's expression changed slightly. He hadn't expected the newly established pirate kingdom to actively provoke the Orthodox churches after that great battle. Although he had some doubts that the elf calling herself Goslinham's arrangement within the scepter of the sea god wasn't as simple as she claimed, considering that Aaron's contingency plan left on the ghost ship hadn't been triggered, Klein had to suppress his doubts for now. After a moment of hesitation, Klein still picked up the scepter of the sea god, which had floated before his eyes and appeared extremely docile. He then manipulated the black tulip to change course, swiftly heading deeper into the spirit world. This would both avoid encountering the bloodthirsty reinforcements of the God of Combat Church and also provide an opportunity to find out what had happened in the outside world since he was dragged into Death's mausoleum. The giant sword emitting dawn light cut through the remaining lightning storm. Boyer Bale, who had dispelled his incomplete mythological creature form, carried the unconscious demon hunter and stepped on a piece of armor shimmering with silver-white light. The orange-red light behind the mask swept over the distant black tulip. Boyer Bale threw the unconscious archbishop to shadows, and said in a deep voice, "It's time to go back. Nestor still needs our help to get away." For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.